Okay.
Attention, please.
Yo. 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 Yo.
What's going on, everyone? It's David Palmer, Leo King, and Dr. Ann Wohlcke here for History in the Stars here in April of 2025. We are not in Kansas anymore, and a fun astrological deep dive. How's it going? How you doing, Ann?
I'm doing just wonderfully. It's excellent being in Neptune and Aries and having Saturn and Mercury and Venus conjunct in Pisces.
It's a lot.
So I don't know. I've been great, and I've been feeling really good. I've been feeling laid back and kind of checked out of a lot of things. But when you turn on the news, people are going a little bit crazy about a lot of things lately. So there's that.
There is a lot going on. We're making history as society and the world right now. And at the same time, a lot of history is about to be written, I still feel. And it always is, though, right? I mean, that's the kind of cool part about history is it has to happen. And so there's stuff happening that's history, and there's stuff that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it does feel like, you know, you brought up this Wizard of Oz concept, and I really enjoy it, this deep dive look into it, because it does feel like we aren't in Kansas anymore energetically. And even just, well, I'd love for you to describe, you know, the way that you really felt the end of the movie called to you and the relation to where we're at right now in life.
Well, on this week's Deep Astrology, you had talked about Venus waking up, right? And Saturn was there. And she sort of you showed all these images on Deep Astrology of what Venus had been dreaming about, and now she's awake, and she's kind of dreaming about all these things that she could have, but Saturn is there kind of putting a reality check on her, right? So anyway, as you were talking about that, and I will let you describe more of that, the image that came to my mind was Dorothy when so at the end of the movie, The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is back home and she's in her bed. And I've always remembered this part of the movie because a lot of things when I was a kid scared me about the movie, like the flying monkeys especially.
Right.
I had nightmares about them forever. But it was the end of the movie that always made me feel really weird, and like she's waking something flying around in the house, right?
Right.
And then they kind of portray it as she's had this big dream. The whole movie's a dream. And she wakes up and she's saying, you know, I was in this place and you were there and you were there and you were there. And they're all looking at her like, oh yeah, Dorothy, yes, wonderful, yes. Like, you know, they don't believe her. So there's this underlying current of she's waking up from a dream and they haven't experienced what she just experienced, right? And then they don't believe her that she was in this other place. That always made me feel weird. Like, these people don't care what she experienced. But today I started to think about how...
This scene right here.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And they're all standing there and she's waking up. But look, it's like they're so happy she's awake. But she looks concerned, right? Like, they aren't getting it, that they were all there. And so in my mind, what I pictured was they're all smiling like, yeah, sure, Dorothy.
Right.
But they're about ready to take her to the sanitarium and check her in. And I was thinking, is that what comes with Neptune and Aries when you wake up and it's just like, okay, everybody, time to check you in for those strange beliefs. Anyway, that's what I thought of.
And I always think of in that movie that if I put it in, the beginning of it, which the wizard is an astrologer tarot,
It's a fake one, yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
like that's literally like the he's got like a travel
Yeah, his wagon.
wagon. It's like crazy. It's like
Did they show it?
wagon. Yeah, here it is right here. Marvel. Professor Marvel, the crowned heads of Europe, past, present, and future, in his crystal ball. Let's see if there's another or clear version of it here. Because I remember it says like astrology and all this weird stuff. Like, God. Here we go. In claim also juggling and sleight of hand.
Interesting, yeah, because that's how he tells her future is
Right.
by sleight of hand, right?
Right.
She closes her eyes and he digs in her basket and finds something with anti-M or I don't know. So,
Yeah,
let's say eat cotton and
eat cotton in spring. Fleming. I think that might be one of the actual
exterior, I think exterior. It's like that's the clapperboard.
But it is very interesting that there is this wizard who, it's like he's in his spiritual thing, and then she ends up going into that, and then she comes out of it, and then there he is too, hanging over,
also, yeah,
right, kind of watching.
He's the one behind her. So in the image for today, the guy behind her is the person with the straitjacket,
right?
And I actually was thinking, well, it probably would end up being that the weird wizard would come back and treat her with some fake snake oil potion thing.
Yeah, I mean, there he is right there. Like, and he's the one that's like kind of hanging over. It's kind of creepy, right? Like,
yeah,
you're the guy that's outside on that wagon on the street.
What are you doing?
And you're
here?
right over my window,
Exactly.
waking up, that look on her face, like, what the heck? It is very odd.
Anybody else were you ever unsettled by that ending? Maybe that was just me. Maybe it's just sort of like after all the beauty of the Technicolor, and you end up back in Kansas in the black and white, and everyone thinks you're crazy.
That's it describes the Neptune transit we've been in there at the end of Pisces, and then it's like Technicolor and Oz and green, and then he's really this little short guy, and he's actually the guy who's actually outside who really kind of got you into all this. And then Neptune Aries, very just kind of like, it's dusty and kind of bland, because you would think, but Aries is such a strong sign, but it's actually very red. But you see the coloring, it is technically that's not black and white, that's sepia.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then on top of it, if you think of the Civil War, I mean, it's kind of barren energy. It's like, well, everybody's congregating in a field to kill themselves,
Right, and even the color tone of this image,
it was
is
sepia.
like those early photographs.
It was sepia, yeah.
And I'm sure, they can't have known that L. Frank Baum himself, the person who wrote the book,
Right.
like I then went and looked at his astrology and found that he was born in 1856, and so he had Neptune in Pisces, and he had Uranus in Taurus. And he would have lived through the Civil War. So he lived his childhood, which is funny that he's trying to write these children's books for kids to probably revitalize childhood after people experienced the American Civil War. And he would have lived through that through his childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, and he was from New York, so he would have been.
Do we have his birthday?
Removed. Yeah, it's.
I'll put it in because I've not. I just told Ann, I was like, hey, I was like, 1856. That means he has Jupiter, Neptune conjunct in Pisces. You had brought up the Uranus Taurus, which we went through in 2022. So he had a lot of similar transits of 2022.
So he's May 15th,
All right, May
1856.
May 15th, 1856. And it was bleeding Kansas at its peak at that time.
Oh, isn't that? It's so weird that it's Kansas too.
And that's what's really weird, right? We don't have his time, right?
I don't know. I could look and see if anyone has his chart up.
What's his name again?
L. Frank Baum.
L.
Baum.
Baum, Astro. Let's see here.
Says time unknown on one of them.
Yeah, that's fine. I can live without the time. But let's take a look real quick. Look at this guy's chart here. Who came up with this crazy? It was a set of stories. It was a continuation. You know, it's kind of like how, you know, we're seeing a lot of fictional fantasy stories. It's not just one book; it's many. And that's what's interesting about the story of this. It's a lot more than just the consolidated version of the movie.
Right.
So much more.
He had so much more. And then it's interesting that he himself, in the 19-teens, he was trying to create a silent film studio where he would create films for children. And, you know, the other thing I thought of is it's funny that we've got Wicked out, or it recently came out, which is the story of
Right.
what happened in the fantasy land,
Right.
in the Emerald City. What was the real story? And here I've been thinking, I want to know the real story of what happened to Dorothy after she got back.
Yeah, it is kind of. It even makes the wizard even more like deceiving in the wicked part of it. Like, oh, I don't care about the animals, like, and they're not allowed to talk. And, oh, and by the way, yeah, like, I'm your father. To the Wicked Witch of the,
right, in Wicked.
yeah. Because they show in the movie, you know, like, you know, her mom was a floozy who cheated on her husband, right? And they don't show the character, right? But they don't show the character's face of him walking in drunk, and it's him drinking a crazy green potion, and that's why she turns out green, right? So he's the one who intentionally impregnated her mother and knowingly impregnated her to be a witch.
Wow. I just don't, I've seen the musical twice. I haven't seen the movie.
Oh,
But,
well, I just blew it for anybody who hasn't seen Wicked.
Well,
But yeah.
I've seen the musical and I still didn't remember that part, but I guess I do.
Right, yeah. So, and then it shows also how the fairy godmother, right?
The Good Witch of the East.
The Good
West,
Witch
the
of
Good
the
East and the Wicked Witch
right.
of the West.
It was friends with the Wicked Witch in the university that they try, you know. And long story short is she's also kind of a fake. Well, I mean, it is kind of a woke-topian version of Wicked.
Yeah.
But anyway, it still was. I mean, I wasn't obsessed with it, but it was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting idea.
Well, I always liked the story. I liked it. I mean, we went and saw it. Saw it with both of my kids. Like we saw the musical twice, and I just remember thinking, this is a really great idea to show the backstory of the character we all think is evil, right? Which is interesting. And since then, that's been a story that we see a lot, that we've seen a lot, probably through Neptune and Pisces, is the backstory of the evil character. And I always think that's interesting. But now it's funny because now when Neptune's in Aries, I'm suddenly interested in what happens when you wake up. And I mean, really, because I feel like right now in society in general, we're in a world that is not like anything probably anyone on any political side expected. And from day to day, we're waiting to see what's going to happen next, right? So
what's weird is his son in Taurus, he was a Taurus, of course, but at 24 degrees and 47 minutes, that Uranus just left this. Uranus has been all over the Wizard of Oz creator's sun the last year and a half.
Wow.
2, Jupiter at 1 degrees Aries. So he was born right after that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in 1856. And that's where we're going to see Saturn this year, and we're going to see Neptune this year cross over this. So he's getting a lot of hits on his chart. Plus, he was born with the North Node in Aries, and we just saw that finish out as we started this year. He had a Pluto and Venus conjunction with that North Node in the 12th. I don't know what his ascendant is, but I do feel like this guy, he also was born while Mars was stationing about to retrograde. Just hours before.
Where was his Mars
within that 24-hour period. I mean, I can get exact, but you see his Mars in Libra conjunct a Moon in Libra. It was really interesting that Mars was about to station retrograde right when he was born. So he would have spent a majority of his life with progressed Mars retrograde, going backwards back into Virgo to trine his sun. So I would say he's with Sun and Uranus conjunct. So that's what's interesting is the Uranus of the 1850s in Taurus. We then, of course, had the one that we've seen in the 40s, right? In the 30s, late 30s into 40s. And now it's this one. So if I were to kind of like put it in a weird context, I feel that, what kind of series right now is of a fantasy is trying to have its effect on people that will stay a long time. Jupiter, Neptune, even though they're intercepted and not conjunct in the same sign anymore, but they had just been conjunct there in Pisces, and we just saw that reemergence. It's interesting that I would have to like really kind of comb myself over these last couple of years if there's a movie that we can be like, yeah, this really is relatable to some bigger spiritual thing or not. I mean, I don't know if you've ever taken Pink Floyd and mixed it with watching The Wizard of Oz at the same time. Kind of odd how well that goes together.
Yeah.
But I would say this guy found a way always to get, like, to him, I think it was probably exciting seeing all the stuff that he saw. With the Sun Uranus, I mean, in Taurus, I don't think this guy had problems getting through life as much as always wanting to be ahead and never being able to, like, he was always too ahead of his time to create what he wanted to create. And that's actually ironic because that's, I think, part of his story, right? He always wanted to be in film and silent film, and then he died before they made the Wizard of Oz we all know today.
Well, when was he born? So he wasn't...
1856. So
how old was he when he died?
He must have been probably when Mars stationed direct, something like that weird in his progress chart. I'm going to look at the... I'm going to look at his right here and let's see his Mars. Yep. So it was in that first day, and then, 600. He had progressed Mars retrograde the whole time. But did you find the year when he died or no?
1919.
Okay.
On May 5th, 1919, he had a stroke, and then he slipped into a coma and died the following day, 9 days before his 63rd birthday.
May 9th, you said?
May 5th, or no, May 9th, because it was...
May 9th, 1919.
Oh, no, he died May 6th. Sorry.
May 6th. May 6th, 1919.
His last words spoken to his wife were, "Now we can cross the shifting sands."
It was actually with his progressed Uranus conjuncting his sun. Let me show people this. I'll have to go to a bi-wheel here. So he was born with Uranus at 21 degrees of Taurus, and then his progressed Uranus was now starting to conjunct his sun. Back in 1919, of course, Uranus wasn't close to there yet. I guess it was an hour after. So in that he was born right when Mars stationed direct, within the hour.
Wow.
Not going retrograde. So it's his Venus, Pluto, and Taurus there that I think is probably, with his Sun Uranus, the most interesting parts of his chart. To see where his progressed Venus had made it. Oh, look at that. His progressed Venus was about to... He didn't make it to where Venus did pass over his Sun, and during an actual... so how old was he? 19 plus
He was
44?
62 at that point.
So 62 days after his birth, he was in the Venus Cazimi moment.
That's happened a lot to people we've looked at.
Oh, yeah. Whenever they have Venus as a prominent planet. Unfortunately, but...
So would you guess he was maybe... well, that was the ruler of his sun, but could his rising have been Libra? I mean, what would you guess? You can't probably make that guess.
I can't make that guess, right? I mean, I could rectify it if I knew more about his story, or I looked at his picture more. He had Mercury in Gemini, too. He actually had one of, like, the best charts you probably could have had at that time period to be alive, in my opinion. Except that Mars, of course, in Libra, but it's like, well, I'll take the Venus in Taurus. And that's kind of where it was. I think for him, it's like, I'm always trying to do something more. It's almost like he is trying to put out a message, though, through his stories of like what maybe he felt spiritually. Because I feel like he's putting himself as the wizard in the story in many ways. Like trying to be the one that's kind of different, right? Because if you think of the movie, right, like he's the out of place person. Like, sorry, Toto's not, nobody in the story really is yet at the beginning, right? But in the Kansas part of it, this guy that's rolling up to tell your future, and she happens to walk in there, and then that's what causes the whole thing. And then there he is the main thing that everybody needs to go to the glowing Oz, the great city, and follow the yellow brick road. But if you find out in the stories, he's the one that's creating the whole division and creating the witches to be upset. And then there he is when she wakes up like, hey.
Exactly.
It is weird.
Huh. Yeah, so whoever is meddling behind the curtain, I mean, but you see him as the character who could be the meddler behind the curtain. Is that it?
Or trying to get the message out that there is that more. I'd be more interested historically where he sat maybe in the politics of the Reconstruction movement and stuff like that. Is there any info of that?
The politics.
I'll put it on yours. Like, is there anything on his Wikipedia about like what he was doing during Reconstruction and stuff? Like where he sat in that aspect of things? Because he's a northerner, right? So he's born in the north. Okay, so
he was born into a devout Methodist family, German, Scots, Irish, and English.
Was he a Mason?
I don't know. We'd have to look that up.
I'll look that up while you're doing this up. Yeah.
His father succeeded in many businesses, including barrel making, oil drilling in Pennsylvania, and real estate. Did you just?
He could have been his dad could have been a Copperhead Democrat.
I wonder.
Which still would have been a Yankee,
Well, listen, look at this. Baum started writing early in life, possibly prompted by his father buying him a cheap printing press. That has come up so much.
Wow. And he has that Mercury in Gemini. The
Rose Lawn Home Journal. I think of that as a cemetery.
Right.
The brothers published several issues of this journal, including advertisements from local businesses, which they gave to their family and friends for free. At the age of 17, he established a second amateur journal called The Stamp Collector, printed an 11-page pamphlet called Baum's Complete Stamp Dealers Directory, and started a stamp dealership with friends. He took on the national craze of breeding poultry at the age of 20, and he specialized in raising the Hamburg chicken. And then he created a monthly trade journal, The Poultry Record. So it's interesting that he's from New York, and what he did in this, what I've read about The Wizard of Oz was that he was trying to create an American fairy tale. So unlike the European fairy tales, where it was all sorts of crazy evil things that scared children.
That's why he says on the side of the wagon, a European,
all the heads of Europe or something.
European mystical or whatever. So he's kind of like throwing it under the bus.
Yeah, it's interesting because, it's funny that another thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is Mark Twain. I don't know why these things are coming up for me.
I'll talk to him about him any day of the week.
But in Huckleberry Finn, or I think it's Huckleberry Finn, as they're going down the Mississippi River, they tell stories about the kings of Europe, right? And it was sort of like this thing that's so far removed, or if you think of a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, that's an even better example, that there would be these legends of the great things that European kings had done, right? But Mark Twain was another person who tried to create this American figure that was going to be different than that. So if the wizard guy, before he's the snake oil salesman, what do you call him, or the quack fortune teller, the fake fortune teller in Wizard of Oz? Yeah,
that at that period of when he wrote it, which was 1900, it was first published. It would have been the end of that period where that was common to see those. It was like the end of that era.
So it's kind
of
like
mystics
the old
and so forth,
way
and
of,
the theology.
Advertising yourself. It's nobody cares anymore. If
it was theological societies at that point,
or theosophy, maybe, So there was spiritualism still. I think it actually was kind of a peak of spiritualism, but it was more scientifically presented. It wouldn't have been kind of this wagon guy going out and peddling spirituality, but the fact that he's trying to impress people by this idea that he had presented the information in front of monarchy to an American, that's not supposed to be impressive. And I think Mark Twain was making similar critiques, because I'm trying to think of when he was writing this, but he wrote Innocents Abroad, a book that's all about Americans going to Europe, and he juxtaposes Europeans with their civilized culture and the bumbling American. Seems to be a theme that we keep kind of coming across.
And that's why I was so interested in like where he was during Reconstruction, because it would have been, I think not enough U.S. historians talk about Reconstruction, and it's just really botched Reconstruction. I mean, it was really political, and it was very much people following their own kind of rules, and it was also the expansion of the country in the West, and really no federal oversight. So it's so funny, the Civil War was about the federal oversight, then yet after it became kind of the West was, you were lucky if the army was by, or you were lucky if, that's why you start seeing marshals and Texas Rangers, and you start seeing like sheriffs and stuff having to take over because the federal government ain't coming by.
Right.
Unless it was the army.
That's another
or
thing.
The U.S. Marshal Service is created because of that. But it was because the banks are being robbed from their wagons.
Well, and at the same time with all that westward movement, that's when so many things happened against the Native Americans, and there were some horrible massacres and
on both sides,
awful things. Yeah,
dare I say that?
There were.
Dare I say that on both sides?
There were, but that's the other thing I've been thinking about. We should do a show about that, because there was this whole ghost dance movement, and I want to see. I'm going
And
to
all the
actually look
buffalo
and
that were
see.
killed.
I'm going to see when that movement happened.
You know, he's at the same time of Buffalo Bill, too, who is talking about American hero stories, doing his
Yeah.
national tour. I have his book, the original,
Yeah.
from that same time
So
period.
we'll have to do that because
Yeah,
it's,
'cause-
it's a little bit later because L.
Yeah.
Frank Baum, he's more writing, because in the 1860s for him, like in the period where Reconstruction was like in the 1870s, he's still too young really to have been politically involved. But I'm wondering about his family since you asked that question.
So I found out a lot of crazy info just now with
Okay,
the Mason thing.
Let us see.
And this is so weird. I'm going to show you guys how this is weird. So Google will tell you he was not a Mason, and he was a member of the Theosophical Society in Chicago in 1892. But I just go right underneath, and there's the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon in Canada, and there he is, same birthday, and there he is, and there he is.
What does it say? Because I can't exactly see it through the camera.
The Grand Lodge, non-Mason. Okay, so they're saying he wasn't a Mason here.
He was
But
a
then
member of the
here-
Theosophy Society.
There's this one article, and it won't even work anymore. That's kind of interesting. Claiming that it was also possible that Baum chose the name Oz from the O in Oscar Wilde, famous author, sodomite, and Mason, born just 2 years. So maybe he's going against the whole Mason aspect. He was a Methodist Christian, so
And they're more, especially on the East Coast, Methodists at that time would have been more your anti-drinking kind of people, like your and very moral, supposedly upstanding people.
I think they helped bring out Prohibition years later. Yeah. I
But
think
that
it's kind of
temperance-
interesting because it, from what it seems to me, is it's the battle of like Freemasons and Theosophy, right? Like it's kind of the occult America that maybe he didn't want to see anymore, that he knew, and that's why he's saying Oz. It's kind of like Washington or the world and this other kind of hidden thing, and they use the occult. That's deep. I didn't. Now you just got me down a deep rabbit hole. But it's kind of interesting that he would be like that kind of guy.
Yeah, it is really strange because, if you look at the kinds of stories that he was writing, it was a lot of teaching children how to access their potential. Because if you think of Dorothy,
Right.
it's like she was supposed to be, she's 8 or 9 in the book, right? So
Right.
they had to make her older for the film. But she eventually has to learn she had the power to get home all along in herself.
Right.
Right? She didn't really need the magical shoes.
Right.
And then she learns that there's no place like home. Home is so wonderful. So maybe I'm being too cynical. Like his point would have been, you don't need all of this other stuff. You've got everything you need right at home, and that it's in the middle of the country. Like he would have seen it as a more populist thing. I think at the time that he wrote, populism was a movement, and there's been an analysis that looks at his books as, and he never said this, but a person said in the 1960s, let me find my little overview. Henry Littlefield said The Wizard of Oz is
I
a
would
parable on
hate to have that
populism.
name.
Littlefield?
Yeah, I would just be like, why to both my parents if I lived then? I'd be like, why?
Would you change it to big field, or you just don't?
I would
want
just change the whole. I'd keep Henry. I like that, but the little field, I would just change it to like, I don't know, something.
So this is another thing I find so interesting. So because of the debates that we're currently in, or the issues with tariffs and the economy, that it says that Henry Littlefield, historian and educator, published an article saying it's an allegory for the political and economic issues surrounding the populist movement and the gold versus silver currency debate in the 19th century. So the U.S. was embroiled in economic struggles following the Panic of 1893. The Populist Party supported bimetallism, a monetary standard using both gold and silver to expand currency. The Republican Party and big business supported the gold standard, which restricted the money supply. And then what happened in that is that farmers ended up being impacted because, and I am no economic historian, so those of you who are more economically gifted can explain this more in the chat. But in the end, there wasn't as much money going around. People couldn't buy the farmers' products. And the farmers are the ones that start to suffer because the money gets concentrated amongst the very wealthy. And the farmers and in Kansas wanted silver to be part of the standard for money.
Right.
And so this guy sees this, Littlefield sees it as an allegory where all the characters represent different perspectives, right? So Dorothy is the common American, possibly Midwest values, or the naive but earnest citizen. The Scarecrow, the American farmer, portrayed as lacking intelligence but actually wise and capable. The Tin Woodsman is the industrial worker. Cowardly Lion, William Jennings Bryan, a key populist leader and silver advocate known for powerful oratory, but seen by some as lacking political courage. The Wicked Witches, East is the Eastern industrial interests and banks. The West is the Western farmers and expansion challenges. The Wizard, a symbol of politicians or leaders who use illusion and rhetoric to maintain control.
That's so funny. That's what I was kind of.
And that never happens. I don't believe that. Anyway, Yellow Brick Road represents the gold standard. Silver shoes, because in the book the shoes were silver. But they changed it to red because it was Technicolor and it looked better on screen, or that's how the theory goes. So the silver standard, when combined with the Yellow Brick Road, could lead to prosperity, the silver shoes. The Emerald City, Washington, D.C., where
that's so
everything
crazy. I didn't know you had this, but that's what was in my head. I was like, that's what he's doing.
And then Toto possibly represents the press or the ability to pull back the curtain on political deception. But what happens if Toto keeps the curtain jammed shut? Like that's kind of, we're in an opposite situation. And
Toto has to be coddled, and
Toto's a troublemaker.
He's a troublemaker, but he also is kind of...
He jumped out of that basket in the movie.
Right.
Of course, I go back to the movie, even though as a child I read all the books. I loved them.
Right.
And but nothing sticks in your mind like the movie because there's so much in there. So anyway, that's an overview of Littlefield.
And I wanted to do the overview of who was president. It was during the Grover Cleveland, like we just saw with Trump.
When the book came out?
No, in 1897 was the end of Grover Cleveland's second term, right? But that's a long Grover Cleveland moment, who was the Democrat, right? And the gold standard wanted to be the Republicans, and that's when McKinney comes in.
Yeah.
And so the book's published as McKinney's president, and then McKinney dies, and then Roosevelt becomes president. Theodore Roosevelt.
And he's from the Bull Moose Party and that whole, wasn't the Know Nothing movement or something as well? They're distancing themselves from that old, seems like he's distancing himself from the old blue bloods, but he is one of them. But he portrays that whole idea of being rough and ready and...
Yes. I mean, he's definitely I would say Theodore Roosevelt's the first GOP president after Lincoln that really takes strong hold of the party and gives it a power, because it started the Reconstruction movement. It was just Republicans, and then finally it's Grover Cleveland who comes in, and then people are like, we don't want that Democrat thing anymore, and then I guess we'll have it again, and then after that it's pretty intense Republican, and then you get Woodrow Wilson, and then you get Harding, and then you get Coolidge, and then you get Hoover, and then you get, of course, the Great Crash that then goes to the greatest crash of FDR.
Right, and that happens
of the social movement.
That's when the movie comes out of
right.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird that it was during Biden that the Wicked comes out.
Well, and even when was the musical written in the first place?
I don't know. I'm sure but I just think it's kind of interesting. I didn't know that there was like all these little like hidden codes for that. I read those hidden codes in other ways on psychedelics when I was young with Pink Floyd in the background.
How did you read them?
Oh, I read it as like kind of like the way that you have to leave the matrix, but you have to go through your life and see the BS in order to wake up. And then like the people that you do it with are aligned destiny with you. We all have parts of ourselves we feel like are missing, but together we help each other find those pieces. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's my like beginning of my spiritual journey, is that time period. But of course I saw the movie many times when I was a kid and so forth, but psychedelic version of my life. And that was,
but what are the flying monkeys like on psychedelics?
I mean, to me, it was more, whenever I watched it, it was kind of like a joke. Like I almost like laughed.
Oh, really?
And I always like looked at the witch energy as not serious, the way that she's on a broomstick and the way that they painted her face green. And then yet that was what always, that was the other thing. I remember having a comment with my buddy about this. Like if her face is green in the city of Oz and the cat, like, you know, Emerald City, and it's all green. I mean, she's working for that.
So you connected it even before.
I mean, it was just, yeah, it was simple.
It
was simple to see that, like why would she be green and the city's green? And then I always thought, because I knew astrology back then, like emerald, right, is Virgo. Green is Virgo. Emerald's the color of Virgo. So I was always like, and then Leo's like ruby or whatever, right? So it's like, it's so not Virgo-ish there. It's kind of like the false version of Virgo. Because more Pisces, you know.
But it's the opposite, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to go back to 20 plus years ago, but yeah, I remember that the monkeys they never caught my attention. What caught my attention was the witch, and that she was green and the Emerald City was green. The other thing too was, of course, because I'm a Leo, I was always like, it was so weird that it was courage with the lion to me and not the heart. Like it was kind of, because I feel like, I'm like, if you have a heart, you have courage. And so I always looked at the Tin Man kind of as the weird one to me, because I'm like, really, people can lack courage, but people who lack courage don't have heart. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I thought that was where I was like, there was something off about that. Because I'm like, it's kind of the same thing, mm-hmm. in my opinion. Because actually the Tin Man's very heartfelt.
Right, but maybe the Tin Man and the lion kind of go together, because
they do.
The Tin Man has the heart, but he doesn't have the brawn, right? And so he just keeps freezing.
Right, so now you're getting into alchemy, right? Tin, right? And then you get bronze and copper.
And that was probably deliberately put in there by
correct.
Baum, now that we know he was a theosophist.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's crazy the time period of like what was happening politically, like with the presidents, and seeing that we're in the last time we saw a president not serve 2 consecutive terms, but serve a second term after losing. is exactly when he's writing the book. And everything that he experienced and went through. And I'm sure that's where it maybe is, it's kind of like a, not taking sides politically, but more like, hey, there's something rigged about all this going on here. Like there's something a little off.
Jen in the chat just pointed out the emerald tablets.
Oh, there's that too. Yeah.
That's a huge connection too.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, because he's born with such a unique, like honestly, and I'm being honest when I look at his chart. His chart to me is one of those that is like, if I were to be alive at that time, that's like an 8 out of 10 really good chart to have for that astrology. Like that North Node in Aries, sure, Mars in opposition, and it just stationed direct, but it's with the moon. I mean, I don't think that's horrible, even though Mars is at detriment. He's got a Venus that's in Taurus. He's Sun, Uranus, Taurus. He's got Mercury in Gemini. He's got Saturn in Gemini too. He does have that Jupiter, Saturn. So we're in the flip of that Jupiter, Saturn. So now Saturn's coming to 1 degree Aries this year, and Jupiter's coming to 28 degrees of Gemini. So we're going to see that flip. But he was in a Jupiter, Saturn square as well.
So is there anything in this chart that would help us as a kind of a key to get through what comes next? Because we can see from this, he's born in Neptune and Pisces. So if we even just look at that, through Neptune and Aries, he was obviously doing what he loved. He was printing.
Did he ever get married? What happened with his relationships? Because to kind of get to that answer, that Venus-Pluto conjunction, you know, Pluto's getting ready to square that spot, but he has Chiron in square to Pluto and Chiron in square to Venus. So either A, he had a wife who got sick, or a wife that didn't respect his values at all and was trying to take him in other directions or telling him that he was not on the right page to go. And he also had probably low self-worth with women too.
And why is that? Because of Venus
square Chiron and Venus and Pluto conjunct. Like no, don't leave, don't. And it's Venus in Taurus, but Pluto in Taurus, so it's not like having a Venus, Pluto, and Scorpio. Those people like don't ever want people to stay, but then they really want them to stay, but then they want them to leave. A Venus in Taurus would be like, no, don't ever leave.
Well,
We're secretly a Venus, Pluto, and Scorpio is like, get the fuck out of here, please. But I'm going to say that I want,
A Venus, Pluto, and Scorpio?
Because we're living in the society where we have the opposite. Venus, Pluto's in Scorpio, right? There are no Venus, Pluto, Taurus, alive right now.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Well, okay. So his wife was born March 27th, 1861.
Oh, so she was in Aries. Okay.
And it's interesting. And I also.
And she's born in 1861, March 9th. So she's born with Neptune at 29 Pisces before it went to Aries.
March 27th.
Or March 27th. Yeah, that was right before because the Civil War was April 12th, right? And 1861 when Neptune went in Aries. So.
And look at this. She's there in Egypt in 1906.
Oh, there's the weird, there's the Chiron and fucking in Aquarius squares Venus. Like, what are you doing out in Egypt?
Well, he's enjoying the mystical sights. But look, it says, described by her children as a no-nonsense mother, Maud took charge of the family finances and the disciplining of her children. She was their primary caretaker because her husband's business obligations frequently led to his being away for weeks at a time.
Oh.
They moved to South Dakota. Gosh, you don't want to be by yourself in South Dakota.
It says complications arising from giving birth to her second son, Robert Stanton, in 1888 caused Maud to become afflicted with peritonitis. See, I said that there would be an illness.
Inflammation of the peritoneum, the lining of the inner wall of the abdomen.
Ill for 2 years.
And she found solace visiting her mother and siblings.
And so
Frank
she
was
wasn't
by
even
himself.
around. Yeah, exactly. That's that's exactly. So what do we see for the future time ahead through that? I mean, we're not going to live through Venus, Pluto, Taurus, but we are going to see these Venus-Uranus conjunctions at 29 degrees this year and next year, right before Uranus goes into Gemini both times. It's the same thing. Venus at 2 degrees Gemini, Uranus at 0, back to back. So there's like a interesting like glitch in the matrix there, like a two cats showing up. And so I think in relationships, with this Venus retrograde, and then I would say that even this whole Chiron Aries thing, I would say there's a lot of people who are going to have to realize, like, if there's just so many things off, I feel like that period of time, there's so many relationships that just don't make sense. Even Grover Cleveland's.
Exactly.
Right?
Especially Grover Cleveland.
I mean, like, it's insane. Like, he's marrying his the
one
he was the guardian of when she was extremely young. And what was she, 21 when he married her, and he was like 55 in the White House.
Until she was old enough,
right? Like, so it's kind of like, I think the lesson is more on the relationship front from him. Like, who like, what are you doing?
Well, yeah, and look, it says she lived in Fayetteville, New York with her aging parents until she married Frank in 1882, sacrificing her college education at Cornell. At the onset of their marriage, she accompanied her husband's acting troupe throughout the United States. So he is the wizard in that rolling wagon, because that's like the acting troops going from town to town.
And see, you wouldn't find that unless you found it through her.
Yeah.
So
and
like, we have to look
at his page. I was thinking, and I'm going to come back to that. I didn't see the political views, but where is she mentioned? This page barely, there it says he and Maud and their sons moved to Humboldt Park, but there's hardly any discussion of. So
that's why, and I'll just put it on my page for a second. When you look at an astrology chart, like, that's why I said his Sun Uranus is a big deal. And then I said is Venus-Pluto. And that Venus-Pluto intercepted, but close to the North Node. But that Venus-Pluto, Venus is dignified there. It's conjunct Pluto. It's in square to Chiron. And then Sun-Uranus, there's two relationship planets, Venus and then Uranus. So he's connected to both. And so, okay, like, the relationships are going to be the thing that helps you see what's behind the curtain with him. And so in many ways, maybe he didn't like Masons because their wives stayed by their side.
Yeah, but they also couldn't join the organization. So
I know, but like a Mason wife still goes, they still have dinners at the lodges. They have events, like, true. Right. And so there's a bitterness for how his personal relationship life is. And it's kind of weird that he makes stories where it's about this little girl finding her way home through this crazy story with all these weird characters that are missing something. It's really what he's missing in himself. So he's missing courage to probably speak up to his wife. He's missing the values that he has problems with. Courage, feeling love, and he's timid, like the scarecrow. He's scared. What was the scarecrow trying to get again?
A brain.
A brain? Okay, so he feels stupid.
Yeah.
Right, for doing that. Even though he's not stupid, that's the thing. It's more about the timidness, the scaredness, the heart that he didn't follow, and the courage he didn't have to maybe follow what he really wanted. He just took Maud on. It's funny because my great-great-grandmother's name's Maud Cushman, so.
Well, and listen to this. On November 9th, 1882, so he's pretty old for getting married back then too. Baum married Maud Gage, a daughter of Matilda Jocelyn Gage, a famous women's suffrage and feminist activist. A newspaper reported their ceremony was one of equality and that their marriage vows were precisely the same. While Baum was touring with the Maid of Erin, the theater, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's where they're talked about. But I think it's really interesting that her mom was a women's suffrage advocate. And then later on, I can't believe this, David, and I did not look at this, as you can tell, because I'm not really prepared for this. But if you go all the way down and it talks about his political beliefs, during the period of the 1890 Ghost Dance movement and Wounded Knee Massacre, Baum wrote 2 editorials asserting that the safety of American settlers depended on the wholesale genocide of Native Americans. These editorials were republished in 1990 by sociologist Robert Venables of Cornell University, who argues that Baum was not using sarcasm.
Is he a Democrat?
I don't know. The first piece was published on December 20th, 1890, 5 days after the killing of the Lakota Sioux holy man Sitting Bull. The piece opined that with Sitting Bull's death, the nobility of the redskin had been extinguished and the safety of the frontier would not be established until there was total annihilation of the remaining Native Americans, who he claimed lived as miserable wretches. Baum said that their extermination should not be regretted, and their elimination would do justice to the many characteristics of their ancestors.
And his wife was actually the leading feminist of that time.
This is where also, a lot of these people in the early 20th century, too, were eugenicists. Like, they were for eliminating certain types of people from having children.
He also had a newspaper in 1891 that failed. So then they left South Dakota after owning their bazaar and moved to Chicago, where he got a writing job for a newspaper and founded a magazine. He also worked as a traveling salesman. He wrote and published some Mother Goose rhymes in a book in 1897 and made enough money to quit the traveling salesman job. In 1900, Frank published The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which was a massive hit. And then he wrote 13 sequels as well as dozens of other books.
Well, that was a very pleasant side note to him.
It's very weird.
Women's suffrage advocate later. Is that what you were just looking at? Or
I was looking at something that was about her being the leading feminist and why the witches are written in the story is from her feminism. Which, here, I'll show people that I'm not making it up. Right here. It's from the Smithsonian magazine, right? This was just recent because I think Wicked just came out recently. The feminists who inspired the Witches of Oz, the untold suffrages of Matilda Gage, the woman behind the curtain, captivated her son-in-law, Frank Obama, as he wrote the classic novel. Oh, so it was... It was his mother-in-law, so it was Maud's mom.
So that was his true inspiration.
Or do whatever, happy wife, happy life, happy mother-in-law, happy life.
Well, and it did say also that maybe this is why we don't see a lot about their marriage, because she was traveling with him, Maud was traveling with him, and then they get married on the road, but she has a child pretty quickly after that.
Yeah.
So maybe a shotgun wedding. I don't know. But I just can't believe how much he did, how many places he lived, and all of that during this period of time that is foundational for our country. And I think we have a lot of connections back to this time right now. But it's very interesting that why haven't we heard a lot about that aspect of him with his hatred of Native Americans. That
So he
makes me
supported the Republicans in 1896 and published a poem in support of his election. He later wrote another poem after McKinley's assassination in 1901 by an anarchist. In addition to being a children's book author, he also worked as a political reporter for a newspaper in South Dakota during the 1890s. His beliefs are not entirely clear, but he supported suffrage, women's right to vote, which was a Republican idea, not Democrat. Later in life, he openly admitted that he wanted to incorporate the time and the fairies of the day into the stories that he had written for the enjoyment of children. So it seems that after his crazy ideas about Native Americans, he jumps in. Oh, for instance, here we go. This article was just recent. It's Behind the Curtain, The Wizard of Oz's Political Allegory Decoded, February 19th, 2024. And so, gosh, I just want to read the article. I don't know. And it goes into this part I was at. I mean, this is also saying that the Emerald City of Oz, a reflection of wealth and the illusion of it, and the economic system and the quest for financial stability, reveals the complexities of the American dream and the challenges of achieving it in a landscape marked by inequality and illusion. The scarecrow, symbol of agrarian wisdom. I think that's more of his own cowardliness inside. But the flying monkeys. Let me get back to the political. A political warning. The president can't. Yeah. So it was in 1896, they keep pointing. That's when he really came out. Then it goes into what you brought up, the silver versus gold standard. It probably took from this article. He angered a large voting bloc for the populist party, the Catholics. Oh, so no wonder he was against the Masons. The fiery passion for his pet issue of the silver versus gold standard led him to make a politically fatal mistake. He did it all with a simple analogy and expression of the arms. Bryan delivered his famous Cross of Gold speech in the 1896 presidential campaign. He used the speech to criticize the gold standard and promote the use of silver. During his speech, he declared, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." Left a strong impression on Catholic audiences. There was something about Democrats in here, though. It's saying that the cycle evident in the pivotal moments where it went populist under McKinney, like the 1896 shift that marked the decline of the populist party, demonstrates how economic, social, and idealistic forces can dramatically reshape the political landscape. For instance, the KKK with the Democrat founded now consists of people who would never vote for a Democrat. It shows how political realignment works. Political parties are just groups, and it's the people who change their allegiances over time. I don't believe that. That's just an opinion. That's not a fact.
Yeah, that's part of what we're experiencing in this world of the wizard, that
Right.
opinions keep being presented as fact, and a fact is supported with evidence.
Yeah, so the only real hard evidence is that he was a political writer with his failed newspaper. Then he worked for a newspaper and wrote politics, supported the 1896 of McKinney, who was a Republican, was a populist. So obviously he was not happy with Grover Cleveland in his second term that had come back. So that's all that we have really of his political leanings. And a lot about the silver and gold. He even wrote that poem in support of McKinney's election. Oh, Kansas and the populist movement. Baum's description of Kansas and the wonderful Wizard of Oz is based on his experiences in drought-ridden South Dakota, a region that it was heavily affected by the populist movement.
This one also says that this is from that Wikipedia entry where it talks about he was a Methodist but joined the Episcopal Church in Aberdeen in order to
Wow.
participate in community theatricals. So
He wanted to just go through the experience.
right, later he and his wife were encouraged to become members of the Theosophical Society. Baum's beliefs are frequently reflected in his writings. However, the only mention of a church, okay, we're not going to do that, but
That's very Sun Uranus personality. Like,
is it?
yeah, like Trump. Oh yeah, I'm Christian now and hold the Bible upside down and right, like,
Right.
and I'm part of this place and I'm there and I'm over here and I'm this and I'm that and no, I'm not that anymore. I'm this. Right? It's very Sun Uranus.
But here's another theory. So writers, including Evan Schwartz, among others, have suggested that Baum intentionally used allegory and symbolism in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz to convey concepts that are central to spiritual teachings such as Theosophy and Buddhism. They postulate that the main character's experience in Oz represent the soul's journey toward enlightenment.
That's what my experience was on LSD watching it.
Well, then you tuned into what
The higher
Baum
octave of
expected.
what the Uranian version of his version of it. Because it's kind of like going through that old silent movie Metropolis or something in a weird, different way. But it's kind of like, that was a crazy movie. And parts of that film, they lost some of the film reels. So they always go, oh, missing reel.
I just don't think it's an accident that we're thinking about these things right now, because also Metropolis, it's all about an underground
Right,
city,
yeah.
right? And with the pyramid
Right.
discovery thing, where we
Right.
don't really know what that is, but it's bringing up those ideas too.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it's interesting too, because it is this state of like surrender that really she has to go through. Like every part of the movie is her having to just like, she didn't have to do anything that hard. Like she landed on the witch when she arrived and
everybody celebrating.
one part of it was gone. And then everybody loves her for doing that. And then she has the good witch that's there. And then she finds her friends right away. And then their only problems are getting to the crazy dude who's deceiving them, that has his daughter after them. And it's not like they had to do much. I mean, there's a couple scenes of, like
Well, but it's
by
interesting
them flying
that
monkeys, and that's about
I was
it.
terrified by that.
But like,
The
you know,
Scarecrow lost a lot of his stuffing. That was
That's
very
true.
sad. But anyway, the whole thing with Surrender Dorothy, you made me think of that whole scene, right? Do you have that? I want to put that picture up.
Yeah,
But
put it up.
I can't spell surrender. Dorothy. Whoops. Right? When the witch writes that in the sky, I don't think that's
Right.
an actual picture of it, but why does it everybody get this from the Swiss embassy? but yeah, I mean, it's just interesting that you said it's all about surrendering.
right.
But in
I
this
forgot
part-
about that part in the
this
movie.
part of the film, though,
Actually, to be honest, that's the most horrific part of the movie in my mind. If I remember back in my LSD experience, being like, that is trippy and just kind of weird because there were no airplanes, right? So, like the way that you see airplanes put that into the clouds in the sky,
Yeah.
right? Like there were no airplanes.
so it's so funny too, because it's like you're saying Dorothy's learning to surrender. The Wicked Witch is trying to tell her, just surrender.
Well, it's
But
kind
we
of
see it as, oh, no, we
it's the
can't, we
multi-layered part that you learn. Like there is a dark force because it's the Wizard of Oz's daughter. Let's not forget that Wicked Witch is his daughter. That's being like, surrender, bitch. But the higher forces are saying, just surrender. You don't need to surrender to her as far as like energetically, but you surrender to this whole situation. You're going to pass through all of it. And then there's the wizard when she wakes up, just surrender. I'm here. Like kind of creepy, but
It's just the weirdest part.
but it also is something, you know what it reminds me of is past life regressions. When you go through them in a hypnosis, there's people in your life that you will see them in your past lives as different people and different whether it's different relational aspects. And when you get out of the session, you're like, look at everybody like, you were this in my life, and and that's what that's to me what that scene is more like.
So she's waking up from her hypnosis session, and she's seeing.
Right. Who's not to say that he threw her under hypnosis?
Well, yeah. I mean, he's sleight of hand, and
right.
At that time, you would have also known hypnosis to try to.
Mm-hmm.
But did he? He did try to. Did he try to hypnotize her? I can't remember. He's telling
I think
her
he
to
has
close
the
her
crystal
eyes.
ball.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that the crystal ball comes back again in the film when she's able to look back and see Auntie Em at home. It's in the Wicked Witch's tower where she's trapped.
Yeah.
But
very.
So she's
yeah.
in. If you think of that as like being in the past life hypnosis, which, you know, he's a theosophist. Maybe he was thinking like that, right? But if you think of that, she's seeing to her future life from that location, right? It's showing the idea of the wall between the worlds is permeable. Like you can get from one to the other, and it's not only from this knocked out trance state, whatever it is, back home. Like within the fantasy and the dream, you can connect back into who's searching for you back at home. She's
Right.
trying to get home, but Auntie Em is also trying to find her.
Oh yeah.
So what do you have?
I pulled up because I was like, okay, so what is the astrology of when the movie that we all know
Yeah.
was released? Because I'm like, maybe there's that, and so it's August 25th, 1939, which is kind of going to be crazy because I already know in my head that we're at the Uranus point of that right now. And that it is a Virgo release date, which Emerald City and Virgo ruling Emerald. It's kind of interesting.
Neptune's in Virgo at that time.
And then
too.
Neptune's in Virgo. Let me get out of the bi-wheel here and let me get back to... let's get back to dignitary. Okay. So on that day, Venus Leo, 28 degrees here with Regulus. Pluto at the beginning of Leo. So we're in the opposition Pluto, right? And then there's that Uranus that went into Gemini in 1940. So it's kind of weird because it's the same Uranus as Wicked's release.
That is weird.
So
They did it on
somebody's
purpose?
doing astrology,
Yeah.
and literally on the Uranus return of the movie, Wicked was released.
And how many years is the return? Is that
84 years cycling, yeah.
so? There'd be no reason anniversary-wise to do it because nobody celebrates the 81st anniversary of something.
No, but somebody followed, or this is where he is a Sun Uranus at 21 degrees Taurus.
That's Frank L. Baum's son.
His son's 24, his Uranus was 21 degrees. So
Wow.
so the movie is the same Uranus as his Uranus. So the Uranus return for him is the movie when he's dead coming out. The Uranus return again is Wicked coming out.
What? That's
I
weird.
can't even make that shit up.
Why? So why would that happen, David? Tell us. What's
I mean
the
that
astrological reason?
well,
for that?
that would be one. Astrology is always on the point, and that it's connected to astrology, meaning that there was astrology used, and that's part of something that's one of his secrets with his Venus-Pluto conjunction that he was doing, right? So he might have been into theosophy and so forth, but learned a lot of these things and kept that in the back, especially if he's into Buddhism. And then the deeper you get down Buddhism and you get into Tibetan astrology, and the way that you actually look at the Tibetan lunar cycle is based on how you base all of your meditations is on the Tibetan lunar cycle, right? So you're using astrology with that and understanding the dark of the moon and so forth we get from the Tibetan lunar calendar. But the other one would be, so he's born right before the Civil War. Wizard of Oz drops. Every American sees that movie, and then we go into World War II, and now people just saw Wicked and fill in the blank.
But why? So here's the thing. Clearly, the universe is telling us something.
Yes, and this is where
this movie has some kind of symbolism that goes with Uranus and Taurus for us, and we're not getting it. We're not surrendering or whatever it is. So what is it?
Oh my gosh. And the release of Wizard of Oz was exactly like him, with Mars stationing direct within the day and the hour.
What? Oh, and that's so rare.
That's
too.
beyond rare. You cannot get more, like,
Why?
right? Like, you can't get more, like, what?
And I'm trying to remember.
And with the moon, with that Mars, just like in his chart, but it was in Libra. I know people can't see it, but I'll make it. That's insane. So it's his signature as a chart. The way the phases and the way that the cycle of Mars and what it did at the moment, right? That within that 24-hour period, it was direct. Same with his life, same with his birth, same with the movie. Now I have to look at Wicked's release because I'm like, okay, this is just too weird.
And also, if it matters, the musical was, I had it. It was 2002.
Oh, November 22nd, 2024.
I remember you talking about that Mars retrograde. I'm sitting here thinking, what were you saying all about it? And the Broadway musical premiered October 30th, 2003.
Well, Moon and Mars again. So there's a Moon and Mars with all that, and Uranus at 25 retrograde. So Wicked doesn't hit it, but the filming of Wicked was Uranus at the same degree. So
that first one was when they started filming Wicked? Was that it? Or?
yeah, so Wicked is more the Neptune return for him. Now his is at 20 degrees, this is at 27, but the concepts of Wicked go back of doing it 3 years prior. From what I had seen, it was like 2021 they started beginnings of creating it, which would have been the same Neptune. So the Neptune return is the Wicked version, which that goes into more the stuff you didn't know. Like, it's actually more of the exposure of, like, this is who the wizard really is. This is who that Wicked Witch of the East or the West is the one that survives. The East dies right away, right?
Oh, right. Her sister is the one that gets smushed by the house.
Correct.
Is she the Wicked Witch of the
I
East?
forget. I always forget.
She's the Wicked Witch of the East. What's Glinda then? I have to look her up. She's just Glinda the Good Witch.
Well, she changed in Wicked the movie. I'm not a fan of these series, or but in the movie she changes her name.
Right,
and she's actually not a good person. She's a narcissistic woman in the movie.
Yes, she is.
And even as the good witch in the Wicked movie, she's like putting on the show to be the good witch when she's like, oh, let me get out of here, these fucking munchkin people. And she doesn't, like, there's a munchkin who has a crush on her at the University of Oz or whatever, and she's like, I'll throw my fucking sister on you, you know what I mean? Like, or whatever. Like,
she's a mean girl.
Who's crippled in a wheelchair.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Right? Like, you're a munchkin. Have a girl in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. Like, that movie is like very harsh as far as, like, I'm surprised it was so woke, yet it had hidden underneath it, like, why it's so dark, the wokeness, but like kind of like pushing it on people. It was really wild. I would say though that it connects to understanding our society and just a different, it's like the Matrix movies. That's a way to look at the world, but really the Matrix movies are the same writer, the first writer of the Terminator movies. It's John Connor and all that stuff is what the Matrix moves into. That's what it's supposed to be. Right? So the Terminator series is, and what happens with the machines taking over and all that stuff is what the Matrix movies are, the future part of it. So the Wicked would be Matrix, the Wizard of Oz is Terminator. Right? So, that's just another way to look at it that way. But I also would say, when you look behind that curtain of Washington, and this is what I want to talk about. We're not going to go deep down the rabbit hole, but I think I should bring it up because it popped up the other day and I was just like, okay, God's showing me this for some reason again. And then I started thinking about all these tariffs and the trade deals and just the way that everybody has been freaking out. And I'm just like, there's something else going on. So it was in 2009 when Obama was president that there was a girl who did the genealogy of all the presidents and found that all the presidents but one all had the same grandfather, 26th for Obama, 27th grandfather down the line, but they all came from the same king, John, and presidents. And it was in 2009. And where's this? No, not that. Yeah, that's the video. Well, I could show the video, but I'm having the sound off. But in 2009, this was a local news station of a girl who was doing genealogy for herself, but then started realizing I'm connected to this president, but then started going, oh my gosh, like every single president except for Van Buren, who came from a Dutch line, all have the same line that ends at the same person. And it's King John, who literally is the one who ended the Norman conquest kings and took over and changed the fabric of Europe. The Magna Carta was done underneath him. And that's what's weird is the Magna Carta is there's a replica of it that's, or a copy of it that's in the US Capitol. And when I'm thinking about what's been happening in the world right now, that even Obama, right? Because it's kind of hard to believe, but even Obama, all of them, you're not allowed to be president unless you're part of this line. And then when I think of the trade war, I think of it's not a trade war. Everybody's been in on this to wedge China. Everybody's playing their part. Trudeau leaves on purpose because now Canada can just use it as a political thing on both sides and make it look like and hype the story well. Then you have the Europeans hype the story well. And then they turn the table and say, no, let's talk. And then Trump today, all of them, except up to the 10% tariff, but 90-day pause, we're going to negotiate, but we're going to stay hard on China. And now everybody's like, yeah, China, we need to get on. Then today, right now, the Panama Canal, we're signing a whole new memorandum with the country of Panama, like the original one that we did when we built the Panama Canal. And that wedges China out again. So to me, it's like what's really behind it is this way bigger, more crazier thing, because what I've learned in Wicked is the Wicked Witch is the daughter of the wizard. Meaning, same bloodline.
The illegitimate demon bloodline.
Well, that's kind of like an interesting part too, is because who they're all connected to is King John Plantagenet, which is one of the worst kings. You're the British historian, and would you say he's, I don't know, who would...
He's probably not the worst king, but he is a really bad king who was such a bad king that he caused the barons to organize against him. And that turned out to be a good thing. So, I mean...
So where's his ranking for you? Like, who's the worst king for you as a professor of English history and also a historian of English, the primary English history? Like, I mean, like, what? Who's the worst king, the most vile king, the one that nobody...
I'm not going to answer that.
You're not allowed to answer that one?
In the present context.
No.
Anyway, I was going to say maybe who's sitting on the throne right now, but no.
Oh.
Let's see. I'm going to Google this and see what it says.
Oh. I mean, well, if people don't know.
Oh, no, it says Charles the First. The 10
I mean,
worst
he
monarchs in
did get his
British
head chopped off,
I mean,
and he
yeah,
did cause a
so-
civil war, and he did lose the for the first time ever the monarchy in the 1,000, or at least 700 years of rulership in the Anglo-Saxon times. And
So the worst king that they say is Stephen, the grandson of William the Conqueror. Stephen seized the throne when Henry the First died in 1135. This led to a 15-year civil war. The anarchy, yeah.
okay, so this is the Norman knights that came in, and the Norman kings. Yeah.
All right, so there's Stephen. Then it says Edward II. The fearsome hammer of the Scots, Edward II, was nothing like his father, relying heavily on the counsel of unpopular favorite Piers Gaveston.
Yeah, he was a weak king. He was weak. Edward I was hard.
So then he's...
Edward II became king when Edward I died on his way to go try and kill all the Scots. Mm-hmm. Edward II was also... I don't know if the history's like correct, but it's assumed he was homosexual too.
Yeah. I don't know how we can even prove that sort of stuff, but yeah.
I mean, there's so much on that one. Like he found favor. There was a couple like really old documents and like about that his father was like, I don't know if I trust him to be able to handle the Scots and be able to handle this country, because like the town of York had been sacked by the Scots and stuff like that, and he was out meandering, and he wouldn't take his French princess and make love to her and stuff like that. Like,
Okay. But I think Henry VI is probably the one I was thinking would be the worst. I mean, because
he was what? He was an infant when Henry V died, or he was very young? Because Henry V died on the battlefield,
and he caused a lot of problems that came after him. I mean, but he was mentally ill, and he lost a lot of all the gains that were made during the 100 Years' War. And Henry V had been such a successful monarch, for him to come in and just be not successful and lose so much. But see,
wasn't Henry VI,
so I think of that more.
Like so young that like there had to be a what do they call it when you're
A regent.
Or the protector of the, what do they call it? Like the protector of the...
There could a regency or a protectorate, or what's another word for that? Usually
the protector of the realm or something like that.
Probably. I mean, I don't know what they called it, but yeah.
Well, I think back then they were. I don't want to. I'm not. You're the history professor, but
I'll have to look that up.
They would put that it was. I was watching a whole like documentary on all these lately, and it was like, yeah, like he named this other guy protector of the realm, while Henry VI had to grow up or whatever.
So then Richard III, who's been maligned historically, there's a whole society that exists to rectify his historical legacy.
I know, and Edward the Fourth,
Henry VIII.
my direct grandfather.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's not up here though, right?
No, but after he died, Richard III comes in.
So
And that's how I'm connected to the
Lancastrian.
Plangenets, because then one of the daughters that was a Plangenet then is married, so Henry VII can become.
But you're connected to King John, right?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so the secret's out, everybody, for talking to one of them right
Well, if
here.
if you come through the line that
Well, all those people are connected to, one of them is Isaac
a lot of them
Allerton.
are Isaac Allerton and John Hawley, and I'm connected to both because Isaac Allerton married John Hawley's daughter after his wife Fear Allerton died. So,
Yeah. Everybody take note, and
so,
they'll be writing. They'll
if
put-
you didn't,
be posting
if your
that on
family
X now.
wasn't, if you're not direct, meaning like those are all direct. Like
Yeah.
like my great grandmother's last name is Cushman, right? Like so, Maud Cushman, which I brought up earlier, which that's direct because Thomas Cushman marries Mary Allerton, who's the youngest one on the Mayflower, who was the daughter of Isaac Allerton. And so most of the presidents, and that's what's weird is you hear all these names in the Mayflower, but it's Isaac Allerton and it's John Hawley and it's just two others that are the ones that all the presidents are connected to, not the other passengers. So
So King John's not even on this list. I mean, so he was bad, but he led to
Maybe-
the Magna Carta. So
Yeah,
and
and
he did allow that to happen, and he did consent, and they came up with this list of all sorts of things.
That's crazy.
That were new protections.
I mean, I could understand about Charles I. I mean, if you take it from a standpoint of monarchs, yeah, you're getting beheaded by the people, and you're getting beheaded in the middle of like the common ground off royal.
Well, they put you outside your own
Yeah,
palace.
you're
and
outside
they're
your own
beheading
palace
you?
and you're being beheaded, and people are throwing lettuce at you, and then they're saying they're ruling the whole entire country now. Yeah, I would say that's bad.
Yeah, he failed. But he still
And
is not number one on
there wasn't enough skull juice to save you on that one. Skull,
That's why his son was obviously obsessed
Right.
with sculpture.
right? Skull
We
powder.
could do so much about that. Your father loses his head.
I know.
Then you think that skulls have magical powers. Maybe it was his own father's skull.
But so we're not going to go too deep into this. Maybe this will be another episode. But the reason why I'm very interested in what's happening in the world right now is that all the U.S. presidents are connected to this king. And this is the king that is the first king that comes in after the Norman knights, like William the Conqueror, that comes in and kills who is in control of England from France, Normandy area. And the Normans are ruthless and they are intense. And then finally there's this idea that, we've got finally an English, king again. And it's this beginning of this new way forward, but really he's a ruthless, harsh, intense king. But it's the creation of the Magna Carta, the story of Robin Hood. This is the king that is used as the bad king, as Richard's like the good king or whatever, and John's the bad one. Right? So the whole stories that come out of all this are from that. But the Magna Carta, I think, is a big deal. And also he was part of, and it's in the Robin Hood story, that when Richard is out at the Crusades, he's at home causing ruckus. Right? So it's kind of an interesting, weird thing with the whole crusade element aspect of why maybe people need to think of why the United States is like very invested in the Holy Land still and supporting Israel and stuff, because it's for the whole, it's not so much Israel as always keeping a door that could break to walk in and reclaim Christian sovereignty in that area. That's my own personal take. There is no facts to that. That's my own crazy, it's not even a conspiracy, but just there's a lot of this idea of the Crusades being, whether it's in Masonry, which there's a lot of presidents that are Masons, you know, and if you're part of this line, you're connected as well to Scottish and English. That's the other thing too.
I was thinking about this then, what you said about Israel and this idea of protecting it so that you can protect that there's this door open to the Holy Land, right? And if King John was at home and his brother was defending the Holy Land, so if all of our presidents are connected to King John, are you saying that there's this long-standing debt where now the people from that line feel that you need to protect Israel because John was the bad son who didn't do that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see that. I would say to kind of be nuts and bolts military style, because the Crusades are very military. The problem was that the people that were of the Persians that they were in fighting with, and everybody that was in, what was that back then? It was the Ottoman Empire, right? That they were fighting all the time. The battles that went back and forth between Saladin, between all these people, that it just kept going back and forth between the Persians, the Muslims, and the Christians, right? That I don't look at it the way people look at this whole Israel thing and the conspiracies that people do. I look at it as the conspiracy nobody's saying is that America is like, yeah, these people will put up their own lives. They'll use our weapons and blow up as many people in Persia as possible. And then if anything does actually happen, we have enough of our resources and the connection and know all the intelligence to know when we could just move in and take over the area. So that's where when Trump says, oh, we'll take over Gaza and redo it, right? And people freak out. And I, at the same time, was like, what? It's very much this line that wants to win the crusade that actually lost. It's a huge failure of the Crusades. Did not win. But there's also, when you think of like right now, the talks about striking Iran, right, that are very serious right now. And all of the countries that have been on the list throughout since Desert Storm with Bush Senior, you have to look at like, this is a moment where that's where it's all connected to this like wanting to get back at the atrocities that were done in the Holy Wars, because the Christians always walked out with their swords down, but they always had all their women taken from them and raped by the Persians, right? And raped by Saladin's people and stuff. But the Christians never did that to when they took back over. I did all the history on this, like so, because that's what's the harsh part, is that it's nothing against people in this world. It's just the history, right? Like when the Middle East came back in, they loved to make slaves out of the women and the people who weren't knights, and would do that. And then they would rape the women and keep them in there. And they could, and there was no way to get back in because they would close the wall. Right? So there's this, it's more than about oil or nuclear. There's a deeper thing coming from the line.
Well,
coming from a line with many Masons and all that, and the Mason teachings. And
part of the Mason teachings is you get one level. I mean, I don't remember everything, but isn't there where you have a path and you go one direction and you can become
to the left, or to the right? Yes, to the right.
Or it's a ninth order.
Yeah, once you're at the first degree, then you jump, and then you start going down a Templar line.
Yeah. So there's definitely that aspect of it. This idea that the Templar Knights will come back or something. I don't know what
they
it
are
is,
back. There's if you look at most hospitals in America, it's Templar, right? Shriners.
Yeah, we looked into all those orders once.
Oh, they're all those Masonic or Masonic / Templar Knight. They bleed the same blood and they have the same connection. So that's so like the idea of, you know, everybody's controlled by Israel is laughable to me, because actually China is the one who controls all of Hollywood now. China is the one that everybody's going after around the world right now. And if you look at the globe and you look at trade and you look at what's happening, it's all China. And it's like America's like the last place left that could fight it as far as money and stuff like that. Right. So like, that's where it's like, it's not as easy to just say, oh yeah, one group. That's so illogical. You know, like, I don't think Jews are sitting in Japan right now controlling the rice, you know? And so that's, to me, where it's this deeper story in Magna Carta, which is in there, and this idea of like these rights and the way that the proper rules should be between the people and countries and your roles, and habeas corpus is one of the ideas that comes out of that, not just imprisoning people because of what was seen during the Holy Wars. The imprisonings that you know, people in the Ottoman Empire were doing to Christian women and raping them and holding them hostage.
It was also what the king was doing back in England.
Yes.
To get what he wanted to have done, to accomplish what he wanted, or to, there was a lot of mismanagement or a lot of illegal taxes, or maybe not illegal, but just things people thought were unfair.
Yes.
Were happening. And so that regularized all of it. But at the same time,
he was also excommunicated by the Pope.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, at the same time, there's this whole thing where he does not want the Archbishop of Canterbury that the Pope has appointed for England. So it's this first big pushback against the Roman Catholic Church on behalf of the English king.
Yes.
That then later King Henry VIII takes all the way further, and it comes up again with other monarchs. But it's that whole idea that we don't want an outside force telling us what to do in our own country. And then the Pope excommunicates the king, and that means all the people. It's not actually, what is the word, the interdiction or something that he issues, where all the people in England are not able to access the services of the church because of the Pope's proclamation.
Yes.
And so by default, that means everybody is condemned to hell or wherever, right? They're
because there's no alternative.
Yeah. And so,
but maybe he was trying to wake people up to the alternative.
which is what? Going to the
So this is where it goes down the rabbit hole of the Masonic orders and why it was Templar Knight initiatives, is because the Templar Knights, on their holding the grounds and fighting in the Holy Land, realize that the stories they've been told are all bullshit, and create their own society, their own financial system, and their own belief system, create the tunnels that Hamas uses today, stuff like that, right? Like, they create their own systems in there. They set up, in case they know they're going to lose it, that they could find ways to get back in there. Like, it's really intense, but a lot of it was also that they stopped following the ways of the Catholic Church being in the Holy Land, right? So the idea is kind of maybe that it's kind of trying to get the people to wake up, like, you don't need the Catholic Church, because the irony of the presidents that have been Catholic, the only two, Biden was humiliated intentionally. People know, everybody knew, but they let him fumble so hard, right? JFK, from what we're seeing in all the documents, like, it's everyone knows the government knew who killed him, and it was part of it, and then they just laugh about it, right? So there's something bad about the Catholic Church here because of what happened to the Templar Knights in 1307. So it goes into that part where that's why the country's not Christian, it's Freemason.
or deist.
Or deist, yeah.
I mean, we could just say deist, because all of the people who founded the country were not all Masons.
And to be
right?
fair, Templar Knights follow Christianity, but not the same way a Christian follows Christianity.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I just, for some reason, I don't remember what it was. I went down this path lately of thinking, why are we so obsessed with Jerusalem? Let's just say it that, like, just Jerusalem. And I was thinking, because in the Bible, it's like the New Testament comes after the Old Testament, right? And in the Old Testament, the temple falls and all of that, and then Christ is the new Messiah,
Right.
because it's supposed to be about, the way I understood it, is that you don't need a temple because the kingdom of God is within each person.
Yes.
And the connection with God. So that it shouldn't be connected to a temple, the idea of a temple, and the idea of a sacred ground. And so I went on this whole like research binge looking up something about that, but then also for some reason I got obsessed with, where did Christ really go during the time we don't know where he was, supposedly, right? Because
So after birth, right? After the virgin birth into the year, his 33rd year.
And then there's a little bit of time where he's in the temple and they talk about how precocious he is, how smart he is, this little kid. And then he goes off and his family has to go off to Egypt because of Herod trying to kill all the male babies and all of that. So
that's where he learns astrology.
Yeah, so he goes to Egypt and
that's right when they came, the Egyptians had really, truly had given, well, a lot of the Greek astrologers and Roman astrologers had finally gotten the ascendant understandings from the Egyptians.
Yeah.
Right, so people don't realize the ascendant comes from the Egyptians.
Right, and so the Essenes were around, and they were a combination of kind of Greek and Egyptian thought as well, and it combined with Christianity after his death. But he was familiar with all of these other traditions.
Right.
And so when he comes back and tells all of his parables and things that are also a lot about enlightenment and
finding the power of God within you to heal yourself, and how you conduct yourself morally to heal others and encourage others to find that healing within themselves.
Yeah. It's a it's a departure from the idea of needing to have a home base for your religion. But where that comes from is the Roman Empire, as you've pointed out, right? The Roman Empire needs the structure and thinks, okay, well, wait a second, we crucified this guy long ago, but how convenient. Let's embrace that religion because it helps us organize all these people. And I mean, I'm being cynical.
And monotheism, right? That you don't
sure.
need to go to this God to get this help, that you can go to one space to get everything you need.
And even for a long time, it was tolerated where you could still have your other temples and things.
Yeah.
But then, or you connect it with God and you still have the other idea there. And there can now be a saint that's connected to it.
So what did you find in your findings with that?
Oh, just, people have all sorts of things. That the most likely thing is, I was looking into what were the schools in Egypt that he could have studied at. And we know he was Jewish, so he would have studied at the temple there. And I looked up what temple was in Egypt at the time. And what was interesting about that was, yes, that he would have definitely been exposed to the traditions of the priests and priestesses, I guess, from the pyramids and all of that, but also the philosophy of the Greeks. But that temple was very traditional in terms of Jewish belief, because it was like they were trying to preserve it while that was being persecuted.
When they
back
didn't,
in the other part.
he was, Jewish, or Jesus was a Jew.
Yeah.
Yet the Jews did not believe he was the Messiah.
Right.
But neither did the Romans. So it's
Yes. Yeah.
So really the idea of the Trinity in my mind is that it's the breakaway. It's the Uranium moment.
Explain that more.
That we hear about the Trinity, and that really comes out, of course, during the Council of Nicaea and the 325, this debate over what's the Trinity. If Jesus is the Son of God, then he should have the same exact powers as God. That was the debate, and I tend to side with, what was his name again? The German, who went against all of that and got excommunicated out. I forgot his name.
Back in
It was with an A. It was with an A. It was at the Council of Nicaea.
It's not a Venkar. I can't think of his name.
It's gonna just bug me because I'm gonna know it right away when I see it. It's gonna be like, oh yeah, what's his name? Yeah, I mean, remember the date of Easter is defined at this, right? So the whole idea of Christianity is defined 325 years later at this council. Gosh, what's his name? See, look how then calling the Council of Aries or Arles. That's what's so funny. But remember that Constantine was a sun worshiper and soul. He followed sun. He was a sun god follower.
Is it Augustine?
No.
That's right.
The attendance, Abraham, it's hold on. Proceedings. We know about the Constantinople, and then we know the council. The creed, and then here's the creed that comes. Then here's the distinctive elements that Jesus described as light is from light, true God from true God, proclaiming His divinity. All right, okay.
Arius and his followers.
Is it Arius? Mm-hmm. I thought it was
Arianism.
Arian, yeah.
Which is not like...
So he did not believe in the same Trinity. Like, how can this dude have the same energy as God and claim that he's God, right? So the idea of the Trinity is really this idea of the Council of Nicaea that's giving an extraordinary Greek/Roman godlike power to a man, which Jesus never wanted or ever claimed, to create a church, right? So that the idea of the Trinity to me is the three religions becoming defined in that space. But then what happens is really you see a falling away of the paganistic rule by 325, even though it takes a couple hundred years for Constantine because Constantine still allowed it, just it becomes now the national religion in Rome, Christianity after the Council of Nicaea. And then what you get is Muhammad, and you get him being now a prophet, and that creates the Muslim religion, and that kind of erases paganism, and paganism is involved in all three. So paganism is in a lot of the mystic parts of Judaism. It's in mystical parts of Christianity. It's very heavily also in Muslim tradition. So it never leaves. But that's what the Templar Knights bring, is that same magic that Christ understood on his tours. And that's what the Catholic Church doesn't have. Because that's the other thing, is the Catholic Church is really the step away from the Constantinian version of Christianity and creating this whole other replacement in Constantinople and changing it in 800 AD, and then finally having it to where the emperor is the Pope. Right? So to me, that's where this is all about, the presidents and keeping this, ironically enough, not a Constantine version of Christianity, because that's not what Masons follow. That's not what Mormons follow. That's not what, and so if you look in our government, Mormons are a huge part of the money system, and the other side of it is Masons in our government. That's one thing you can track from Washington all the way to now, is there's Masons. And there's Masonic symbols in the Senate. There's Masonic symbols in the way that the whole entire city was laid. So if we're really talking about the Oz, it's the Masonic symbolism in every part. I mean, when you watch senators speak, it's all Masonic symbols throughout the building, throughout everywhere. And the columns, those are Masonic. So people think they're Roman, But ironically, Rome just made these columns without defining each column actually having a spiritual significance. It's the idea of Rome reemerging in America was a higher spiritual version of it through the Templar Knight Masonic version of that by actually associating every column. So if you look at the columns of the White House, that's ceremonial. There's no serious things happening there. But if you look at the Congress, and I have the Mason handbooks, I've done that with you, but that's where the real crazy stuff's being done.
Well, and
so the White House is a show, is the point.
Yeah, it's meant to project certain values about what the nation's supposed to stand for, right? And it's interesting that in the early 18th century, late 17th century in England, there was a movement of gardening that where you could create political gardens and you could make a political statement that was more Republican by the way that you created your garden, and it would have those sorts of classical attributes. You would have pillars and columns and Roman ruins and all of that in your garden.
Right.
And people just think they're recreating these Roman views, but it actually had political significance. And the way they laid out towns and where they placed certain types of cathedrals in which direction, or types of churches, and what they named them. We'll have to look at that in another show.
Well, to answer your Jerusalem question, like why is everybody so obsessed? Just even in the Council of Nicaea, the seventh part of the canon law that comes in, before there's no Catholic Church. Canon law is actually something that's created at the Council of Nicaea. The seventh one is the recognition of the honorary rights of the See of Jerusalem. So everybody claims that they have honorary rights to Jerusalem. Christians do, Muslims do, Jews do, right? Yeah. So it's not Judaism rules the world or something, like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's actually quite the opposite. They don't agree at all, right? Like Jews do not believe Jesus is the Messiah. They won't even eat certain food. It has to be kosher, right? Like, so, like Christians look at it different, and I'll just, like, if you look at like Pete Hegseth, right? And he's our Secretary of Defense, and you look at his tattoo of his Templar cross, right? So like the head military leader of the country wears a Templar cross.
Well, that's telling us something right there.
100%. It's in the symbolism always. So it's not I have nothing against him or anything like that. But for people to realize that this is a military campaign, whether we like it or not, it's sold that it's not. But under the astrology of all the Aries coming in and Saturn, Neptune, and the financial stuff and the trade war and the pushing China out and da-da-da-da, it's a military campaign at the same time. And the way that the Magna Carta, you said this to me before we did this, is with the way that this world is looking at tariffs and all that stuff, is this kind of the end of the Magna Carta? Because there's still 4 different proclamations in that Magna Carta that are holding in the world today. Mm-hmm. So it's 800 years old.
You know what I was thinking that for? It wasn't even, I don't remember the reason I thought that was because you had shown me the thing about 4300 BC being when we had the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, right?
Yes.
And then you showed me your exchange on X where you were talking with another astrologer.
With Peter Novak, yes.
About
the great cycles.
Cycle. And this is the beginning of a season. So then the Magna Carta is a flip of those two, right? The astrology was Saturn and Neptune opposed.
Yes, it was in 1215. It was Saturn in Libra, Neptune in Aries. So
that
now,
marked a moment of gaining something. I don't know what.
And King John was born what? Saturn, Neptune, Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn, but I already said that. Mercury, all in Capricorn. In 1166, December 24th. The last time you could have even had a Saturn, Neptune, and Capricorn was 1989, right? With the Sun, which we know Brian, who, you know, is a high viber and worked at a high vibe. He's born with the Sun conjunct Saturn, Neptune. I'm not saying you're King John, bro, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
So we
but then
really need to get
2020,
Brian on the
then
show.
2020 is the only other souls. There's little 4.5-year-olds right now running around that were born in December of 2020 that have right before the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, when it was in Capricorn, that have Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn with the Sun in Capricorn. So you're living in a world right now that has all those transits that the man that signed the Magna Carta under a Saturn opposite Neptune with Neptune in Aries in 1215. And if you use Nostradamus's work, right? 1213 into 1214 is part of those Saturn cycles. If you go to 1555 and you go back every 29 and a half years, you get to that, you're going to get to a big marker point, and it's the Magna Carta, Saturn in Aries, right? Using his, and if you go back that many years, that's a 7 cycles of Saturn. So now we're at another 7 cycles going, as I've been following, that starts in May when Saturn ingresses into Aries. So I would say you're right that you mix, and I'll show the chart of what Peter Novak and I were talking about today. Right here. That the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, the last time they met at 0 Aries, it's been wild because a lot of people have a difficult time finding this because you have to, one, be using solar fire, and you have to install the 10,000 plus year ephemeris. So if you go on Astro Gold even, you got to like see where that is and install, it's larger than the program itself. And then you got to properly know how to do the exact electional searching and have a PC that's good enough to not have a CPU that can actually do it. So if you were to go on some shitty laptop or something, it's not going to work that great.
Mine.
So Saturn, Neptune at 4,361 BC. This is prehistory. So ancient history starts at 3,000 BC. To 500 AD. Prehistory is what this is called. Because there's not a lot written. There's not a lot that's left over. But it really, we know it's Babylon. That's the, it's like Babylon's, this is before Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is 3000s. It's Babylon's big moment. So we always say, oh, Babylon, all this kind of stuff.
It's interesting because, see, on one level also, I keep thinking about the progression of rights. And one of the documents that world historians always look at, if we're doing a unit on people gaining rights, one of the things you might look at would be the Code of Hammurabi. And I think that's around 13 or 1400 BC.
Oh.
But I don't exactly know. I don't remember.
That's an interesting.
Right off
that's an interesting
the top
time
of
in
my
all the
head.
religious texts and so forth.
Is it? And that's always looked at as one of the first attempts to actually write a code. Oh, it's actually composed 1755 to 1750 BC.
Oh
And,
yeah, there's a lot of great astrology happening, and that's you know, the Israelites. A lot of their histories is happening in there too.
So it's written in the Old Babylonian dialect of Akkadian.
Ah, so is, you know what people should say? Babylon rules the world. Because if all that stuff from Babylon is being written by the Jews, by the Greeks, by all these kind of people are not, they're always so just whatever they heard. That's the thing you learn about. I don't like Sam Harris, but Sam Harris is right when it comes to there is no free will. Meaning that you're only given what is brought into your environment, right? So like people, because they heard it, they believe it. Like they won't do that. Like Well, where did those people get that information from? They don't go farther back.
Oh, yeah, and that's
So-
not encouraged today. In today's
Correct.
world.
So it's Babylon in prehistory, which none of us, unless you're really at a unique university, then some prehistory professor that's obsessed with prehistory, which I don't think there's a lot of students in the prehistory.
They love it.
Unless maybe it's geologists that do that so they understand the geology of the places better or stuff like that. You know what I mean? Because it becomes, or archaeologists, of course, it because it's so far back. But people, that's crazy. That's not crazy to me. That's beautiful to me. That the codes and these weird things from Babylon
Sorry.
are influencing the cultures 3,000 years later. And for us, that's still 3,300 years ago. But the cycles that Peter Novak talks about is, which I'm glad that he brought this up because like it really does. I didn't put it into this context until he said it. And then I instantly went, oh, that's so smart. That if it's 6,400 years ago, or almost exactly a quarter of the precession of the great year, which is the 25,920 year cycle of what we see in the way that the earth goes up and down from the galactic equator on the disk, but that's what 2012 is that the earth rised up. So that goes on a 6,000 year cycle up and down. That's 12,000. And then to complete the other one, you get to that 24,000. Some of the more Easterners use 24,000 years. The correct one mathematically is 25,920 years. So you can look at it, it's more like a 7,000 year cycle, but it's kind of more like 6,000 something. But it's actually probably exactly this 6,400 year cycle. So we're actually in a moment where the 2012 reset of the calendar is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 Aries, which would make sense that their calendar system, and then finally ours that we're using with planets like we're using now with Saturn-Neptune at 0 Aries as the reset button is happening. And so society, it's not going to be wiped out, but everything that was the way that it was is ending, which means you understanding that we're not the people we think we are. We were brought here. We find the life that really brought us here. Like this confirms the biggest predictions I've been having, that no longer will religions be able to hold the weight to the truth of where humanity really is from, what it stems from, why there's been so many dissenters that always are the ones banished and called the bad ones, whether it's King John, because it's really because he got excommunicated. The same way the Templar Knights, right? The same way that Henry VIII is known for killing his wives, chopping off his head instead of liberating England from the Catholic Church is crazy, right? And he was excommunicated as well. Trump, similar, an American way of, you're excommunicated from Washington, D.C. and your own city you live in, New York City. These are the Martin Luther, right? Excommunicated. To me, it's like we're at that point to the next season, as Peter Novak says, which I love that because it's like it is in a quarter of the great cycle. And if anything, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries at the 0 point, the fact that it takes 6,400 years, it is the sign of when the seasons change on a larger time scale of the pie, of the whole. Right?
Yeah.
So from the beginnings of Babylon to now, maybe that's why it's in biblical text or stuff. They talk about the fall of Babylon, or people try to associate America with the fall of Babylon. But I would say that the fall of Babylon would be the ideas that people believe today that the world is the way they think it is through religion. The fall of Babylon is that. It's the fall of the institutional religion. A lot of people have been getting at me thinking I hate Jesus or the institutions are what I don't vibe with. I don't vibe with the whole Council of Nicaea and creating all this stuff. And I've said it a million times, but Constantine's mom going to Jerusalem and picking the true cross because she has some sick people touch it and waits till the first one that touches it that doesn't die to determine which one. So they don't actually have facts that was the cross Jesus died on. But people follow that cross, they hold that cross, they wear that cross. And it's all based off a snake oil salesman's woman's Etsy store.
Well, we don't remember that part of the story, right? So people are doing that because it has come to symbolize. People will think, okay, that does symbolize Christianity. And they're not thinking it symbolizes the institution that established this version of the church. But I mean, today, it's just so interesting that we have access to so many texts and things that were not included in the Council of Nicaea, right? So all these councils met and determined what would be the official holy book for Christians to read.
Right.
And it was more, certain things got left out if they did not support the structure of the Roman Empire or whoever it was at the time when whoever was creating these ideas.
And this is what the true Jesus cross is, which is, I know it's a Greek cross, but it's the seasonal cross. So the cross you see that the Council of Nicaea created by Constantine's mom, who had nothing to do and needed to feel part of the show. Mommy, go to Jerusalem and find the true cross. And she gets there and goes, well, there's all these crosses because a bunch of people got killed with Jesus as his following disciples and so forth, right? So which one is it? Nobody knows. Get some dead people are about to die and have them touch it because it should be healing power. And the amount of people that came up, I did it remember I did that ChatGPT, I made it the visual and I show her just screaming at these dead people almost like, touch the cross. Oh, they died. It's not it. But think about how many people touched the same cross and died. It was just until finally one person, I'm hurt a little. I feel better. Great. True cross. There it is. And even John Dee goes into it. That is not the true cross when it's elongated that way. Mathematically, spiritually, it doesn't fit into the sacred symbol of oneness like all the other glyphs and the mathematics of the universe. It just doesn't. So and actually you're wearing, and what Mormons don't ever have a picture of Jesus on the cross. Do you know why? Because that is a horrible, atrocious moment. And it's not about that sacrifice, but it's also that there is this false narrative in how it was created through the Council of Nicaea and dramatizing the story and the way that it was depicted and how it looked to go with the cross of this bullshit true cross that then the Catholic Church says that they now have to have some sort of power over people that they just did to Charles III during his coronation. We have a piece of the true cross here. It's like people will just, fall on their knees, do whatever.
Well, it's like an automatic response because if you're Catholic, maybe some Catholics
right.
are going to feel that certain objects are sacred, and you automatically you bring them in right away. You don't have to convince them if you have something like that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm OG Jesus, who was a spiritual healer, and the stories of Jesus in the Bible I'm totally with. I'm not with the institutions defining his story for him. And picking and choosing which prophets determine the story.
Which prophets and which letters after he died. I mean, it's just, there's so much that is
like,
out
I
there.
agree. Like, I think my favorite part of the Bible is Apostle Paul because of his waking up moment. Like, I'm on the wrong side, right? And his shift to doing the right thing and being on the right team. I think, and that's what's weird, is that's like the beginning of the New Testament and so forth, is the Apostle Paul and what he does. And that, to me, it's like, okay, that I can understand, but how many prophets, how many dreams, how many visions, how many stories, because it was 325 years of stories that had to get to there. How many of those were just, I don't like this narrative, it doesn't fit where we want to go, that we don't know about, that got burned, that didn't get seen? And then there was this, well, people in Rome are not going to follow religion unless it looks like Zeus, it acts like Zeus, it talks like Zeus, it feels like Zeus, right? Who was the head of course, after the Titans, but going into the Olympian gods, right? Because it was Olympian god time. They weren't going to follow a Kronos, right? They were not going to follow a Saturn, but they needed to follow a Zeus-like character. And so they turned Jesus into Zeus. So, or same story in Egypt, right? With Horus, right? Died of, or born a virgin, out of a virgin mother, right? You know, died at 33 years old. That story goes on in all the other traditions too. So to me, it's that's why that line through the Templars that create the Masons, because it's a Scottish Rite and an English Rite. Those are the two first Mason lodges, right? And it's really about that the Scottish Lodge is that you are a badass because you have the blood of both. The most meanest motherfuckers are the Scottish and English bloodline cross, because they cross lines in English history of the monarchs. Through the Stuart lines, through the Tudor lines that go to the Plantagenet lines, and then of course York, but you know what I mean? Like you have to have both. So that's why the Scottish Rite was first. Of the greatest knights had connections in their bloodlines to both, because that connects you back to John. John has the same. The Plantagenets have the same.
I just feel like it's...
So then the English Lodge is created, right? Because you're still badass. And that's why all Templar Knights wear the fleur-de-lis, because then there's the Norman Knight aspect, but also the French soldiers that were with the English, the Scotch, and the Spanish in the Templar Knight. And so where do you see the Christian? And is in all those countries and all those knights, but the ones that know not to follow the bullshit church. That's why the first thing in a temple of Freemasonry or in Rosicrucianism is that you believe in God, but you do not bring your bullshit religious God in and judge others because they're not part of that religion or whatever. You can't see a soul to a soul if you're looking at it that way. So there was different versions of the Templar Knights in battle who had different teachings by different popes and in different time periods, or even just different priests. They are getting it in different ways. But in Masonry, which is the beginnings of the Templar Knights, they made a creed of brotherhood for Christ, not by the Council of Nicaea, not by the Catholic Church, even though they were sent by them. That's why they were all killed.
And I also think that's why that tradition's kind of been infiltrated today, or why there's a lot out there about how evil Masons are, or whatever. Like the tradition that's come down from that had to be infiltrated in order to be destroyed. I mean, don't you think? I mean,
I think it goes back to that the quote unquote Illuminati was a good thing at the beginning. It was the people that were Masons, the people that were doing astrology, the occult, the Rosicrucians that were against the church, right? So the church was against the Illuminati. People have to remember that's the term Illuminati comes from the people that were not with the church, that were following God, but not following the church's protocol. And that's what gives rise to the Rosicrucianism, and then of course amazing people come out of that. And then you add the Templar Knight aspect, because the Rosicrucians was more of the alchemists, the astrologers, and so forth. To have the masculine hand is the Masonry line. And the Masons come in with the Templar Knight aspect. So that's why JFK, this idea of no war and not doing anything is kind of a weird thing for a Templar Knight, probably because it's like, this motherfucker's going to do whatever the Catholic Church says to do. It's not about that he's not about war. It's he'll only do it if the Catholic Church says to do it. Same thing that Hitler did. Hitler waited for, it's now proven in historical record, the letters that Hitler got from the Pope before the war. So that's the difference, is kind of like, and the same thing with Biden, like who is in control of Biden? Obviously the Pope. And if you want to go down the craziest rabbit hole, is that it was the Italian government that proved that the election was stolen. They were the ones who had all that stuff. And it's so crazy that it was the Italian Secret Service that understood all of that. If you want to go down that rabbit hole. And then they couldn't because the Catholic Church was involved. And then it was just like, okay.
I feel like this is the interesting part of the story. And and I'm going to introduce something that's back to boring history.
Please.
But, because I'm thinking there is this whole part of the story with these turns from one opposition and a conjunction, and we get to the square and all of that. So what about the point of how does the church connect to the laws, this aspect of codifying laws that seems to come around with this as well? Because when the Masons or the deists decide to found a new government, what's most important is to create this constitution with protections for the people who are the property owners who create the country, right? That they're going to make sure that they have protections that they didn't have in England. And then the time before that, so then there's also... So you mean first the Declaration of Independence... Well, then
it moves to the Articles of Confederation, which was all based upon, which there is now evidence that there is influence from the works of John Dee in the Declaration and the understandings of the ideas of the Republic, of him and all the other alchemists of the time. Right.
Well, if they're Masons, they're obviously Rosicrucians and familiar.
Correct. So like, but then it changes during the Constitution because they've won the war. So like our Articles of Confederation are pure freedom, no centralized government, except for how all 13 states come together through their own congresses to meet and form their own militias and defend their own territories.
So the way that I read it then is that we're at a new time for another type of definition of freedom for this era. Because if we're at the beginning of a whole new season, right, and moving into something totally different, the thing that I keep thinking of is, does there need to be, there obviously needs to be written or structured rights when it relates to things like AI or the role of artificial intelligence versus human intelligence or whatever's coming next, hybrid intelligence. So are we moving?
Well, in a freedom-based society, you wouldn't have any of those regulations, right?
Maybe that's where we were supposed to go.
But I would say it goes to what will be the moment we all fight is when they start to lump us up into just the Americas, all of Europe is one, and Russia's with them, and then Asia, and they start lumping us into just like all these countries are forming into continents that form just one huge pie of people, and then trying to blend us all in and throw massive restrictions on things. That's more my concern than AI. If anything, AI will help us figure out how to bust their bullshit. But what's happening in the trade situation right now, which I don't think Trump's in on it, but I think Trump can be outsmarted in some senses. Like he can outsmart a lot of the system, but where they're going to try and outsmart him is doing a global order, meaning, You want free trade? You want the right trade deals? Well, you said you want Greenland, right? Okay. Greenland, Canada, America, and Mexico become one country. Then we know we're headed in the wrong direction. And so what you're seeing right now is who's going to take over China? It's no coincidence that in the middle of the last 2 days, Ukraine just caught, at first it was 2 Chinese fighting with Russia. Now it's 165 of them going after Kiev. Like what? So whether that's planted or not, probably planted, right? And now everybody's going after China now. And now China's pulling out of our treasuries. Now they're raising their tariffs. We've raised it so high. It does seem like the world is like, who's gonna join together and let's take over. Let's just get these people off. And the same thing happened with Uranus and Gemini the last time in California, the 1 million Chinese Americans that all got, or the Japanese Americans that got put in camps. But now it's all flipped, right? Japan's our ally. China's not. China was our ally, the people who got invaded by Japan. It's flipped. So my main concern is Chinese Americans and Chinese, because now even it just came out a day ago that now the FBI and I think it was FBI and another, I think it's Homeland Security, are coming after the Chinese that own land in America, right? So, like, it's already beginning, the war against China, which I've always said that would be the war. It'd be China. And that's where you're seeing, all this was a show. Everybody played their part. And the idea of the Magna Carta, I think, is holding between Western countries that all have the same bloodline. But they all, and that's what's weird is like King Charles is kind of like, yeah, he's in the bloodline, but he's not as well, he doesn't have as much of the blood of all of the greatest people in that line than American presidents do, because of the Mayflower, because of the leaving, because of the intermingling in America with all the people who came from different parts of England and so forth, and the Scottish side and the Dutch side. The only other, it's been a Dutch president, Van Buren, and then English, because Obama is English. So like that, the fact that the story about the little girl in 2009 saying, actually Obama's grandfather is the same as all the presidents except Van Buren, he's the only one, right? Should have told people like, okay, like this guy's not who you think he is. He's not representing the black culture, right? Fully, at all.
Yeah.
So that's where it's all a show. I mean, Trump's my 12th cousin, first remove, or whatever. I think he's just my 12th cousin, first remove. Right? So.
What's Obama to you?
Obama's actually my 10th cousin. Garfield's my first cousin 9 times removed, because I have Garfield in my line. And he died. He was assassinated.
So you are the person that we need to talk to about all of this interesting stuff, because you're connected to the lineage.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm, as a double Leo, I'm connecting to it, and I'm connecting in the blood of it when I'm speaking these things, and all of the work I've done here at High Vibe, but thanks to you as well. The Hypergate stuff, all the stuff in the John D, going into all these old, like esoteric, the alchemy work, the understanding of what happened in the Middle East, and the carrying over, and the things that have been brought out of astrology through other great astrologers I've learned from, and then bridging all that with all this history. But it all stems there in the Western idea of the world. It all stems with that moment, that shift. Because really the Norman Knights at the same time, even though they're looked at in history as this kind of bad thing, they were rebels. So they weren't following Catholic Church, like ideas that was not as powerful yet, right? During the time of like Charlemagne, when Charlemagne comes in, right? And the Catholic Church becomes like King what was it, Pope Leo the Eighth or whatever becomes the first ruler of Constantinople and the Pope at the same time of the new church. Yeah,
I don't remember. I don't know.
that's in 800 after the time of Charlemagne. Yeah, so there's a rebellion that was always with the monarchs against the Catholic Italians. Then that's why in that presentation I just did right recently at Conscious Life Expo, that Nostradamus pointed me to in his work, that was, why is it that all the Catholic popes right after 1523 were all Italian for 455 years?
Yeah.
Not English. So when you see an English pope, all shit a brick. You know what I mean? Like,
There was a Polish pope, though.
but there's never been an English pope. Do you think there ever will be, especially after what Henry VIII did? That's how powerful he was, or how powerful all of the monarchs were, whether they were in 100 Years' War or the Lancasters against the Yorks and all of that. They all didn't really care because of what they knew in the Holy War.
Interesting.
That's actually why I have that. I sold my King James Bible, but I keep that one book.
The Schism book.
The Schism book
need to do a show
is
on
the
that.
only book at the front of the High Vibe Studios, because that book goes into that history, that it was so many hundreds of years prior to the schism that the English always wanted to leave the Catholic Church. And then what you showed in that episode we did a month and a half ago about the monasteries and looking at what they found, it's the same moment we're in right now with Doge and the federal government. I mean, so this is a monumental moment, and I feel that the Wizard of Oz that you brought up today is like so amazing to see it with the Uranus of Mr. Baum, Frank Baum, right? Same as when Uranus returned for him is when the movie came out, the same degree. That's pretty wild. With Mars stationing direct, the same thing when he was born.
That's crazy.
And then it might be off by 4 degrees, but it's still Uranus and Taurus again after the return that the idea of the Wicked movie is being made and comes out later. You know what I mean? But the signatures for people to look at in that movie, and even his really interesting story of a populist, but also very much, you can't tell with him if he's for the occult or not the occult. He's a Methodist, but then he's not a Methodist, then he's in all these theosophical societies, and then he's hanging with Masons in there too. They even have on their site, non-Mason, but we admire him. Like there's something way deeper there that I think what you channeled over the last, when did that come to you with the Wizard of Oz thing last week?
Watching Deep Astrology, yeah.
Okay, so then this is what came to me with the Planchette family, but because I have such deep roots to that line. But it wasn't that necessarily. It was just this random video that came by about that 2009 and all the presidents, and I went, oh yeah, I remember that. And I'm like, oh, King John. Then I'm like, oh, looking at my ancestry, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, he's my line. And but people have to realize that any of the presidents, that means they're connected to the real sheriff, right, of Nottingham, right, who was actually not a fat, weird-looking bear. He was actually he was a good guy, and he wasn't enforcing the taxes. That was bad. He was actually, so that's kind of the weird part where they twist the story of Robin Hood. The sheriff was actually good. He wasn't a bad sheriff. But they're all connected to those people too. Just like me, because I'm connected to the original sheriff of Nottingham.
I was going to say that, but I didn't know if he wanted to share it. But I remember seeing that, and yeah, that's all I was going to say about that. But I mean, really, I feel like we really aren't in Kansas anymore. I think that's an appropriate way to talk about this. And I had no idea that it was also going to connect to this tens of thousands of year old situation where we're also in the midst of this 23,000 year cycle. Is that what it was?
25,920.
Yeah. I mean, so we really are at a wild moment right now. And
That's technically turning of the ages from a galactic astrology point of view in our own galaxy. That we're turning into a new season that way. Mm-hmm. But it's not the same kind of turn that you think. It's where because out of that 25,000 year cycle, then for the Earth to go around the whole galaxy is like a 22 million year one. And it's kind of hard for us because of prehistory being so not written to know where we're at. But my calculation based off the Mayans would be, and how long their calendar is, that we're either at the, like, if we use astrology, the zero Aries point, meaning that we've completed a 22 million one, if you bring the dinosaurs back in and all that kind of stuff, or we're at the zero Libra point where we're on the halfway part to now humanity, and that's combined with all these things why time feels so different, why all this stuff. But the Wizard of Oz is the very beginnings of how to see the world like Terminator or the Matrix, and how to see through it and to see the denominations of what's really going on and wake up yourself spiritually. And that's what I think right now, what the most important thing. I think you have to look through all of it. You can't be attached to the people on the media, the news, the politicians. You can't be like fawning over them so much. You got to see through that there's so many more backdoor things going on. And even the whole country was defined that way. And that's what Pluto and Aquarius is. It's when the Masons take over the founding fathers, because there's only 7 or 8 of the whole, however many founding fathers there were, like 57 or whatever it was, that were Masons, and they're the ones who take over, and they're the ones who are written about. They're the ones who have all their pictures. They're the ones who become the presidents. Those are the ones who are at the Constitutional Convention. Those are the ones. So the founders that signed the Declaration that weren't Masons are kind of like, nice, thank you. Or they have a son that fights in the war and then becomes a Mason and then comes up. So the idea that the country is Christian is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous, because there's Christian values in Freemasonry, but what you learn if you've ever been into a Freemason understanding at all, or have any Freemason books, real ones, you don't even follow that.
But what's interesting, what I'm thinking as you said that, is that, however, the families that trace themselves back to King John came over on the Mayflower, which means they did come over for religious freedom purposes, right?
Against that version of Christianity, yeah.
Yeah. So they came over to establish a new society that was in accordance with what they believed. And then when the United States were founded, it wasn't because it was a direct line from the Pilgrims, right? It's the idea that there's not going to be a state-run religion that is going to dictate what people believe. Because for our founders, it might have been for Henry VIII, it might have been that he was trying to go against the Roman Catholic Church and establish a new church so that they wouldn't have to follow the Pope in England anymore. But for the people over here in America, before we became a nation, right, it was oppressive having to constantly be paying your taxes or doing your tithes for the church and attending church and living according to this English way of life that didn't make sense over here anymore.
Right.
So it's just interesting that they establish, so we can't say, okay, our country was established as a Christian country, but it was established by a lot of people who had the ancestors who came over for purposes of religious freedom, but they just want to make it so that the state is not imposing any kind of religious belief on on the citizens.
Which is the same exact main center cornerstone of Masonry. Do not bring your religion in here.
Yeah. So I just keep
Do
thinking,
not. Like, it is that is the first thing. You do not bring your religion in here, because we all are under the same belief in a divine God. That is the number one thing that you can only be a Mason with, and that is the number one thing you cannot join. If you don't believe in the divine, you don't believe in God, that is a no-no. You're gone. So God is at the forefront of a Mason. The issue is in getting lost in your crazy religious aspect and bringing it in, because it's not Puritan. But so if King John is the one who signs the Magna Carta in 1215, and it's because of his actions and his excommunication, and because of all of his reported historically mess, which might be kind of a mess like we see now being reported, like, oh, what a mess to clean this thing up is, and what a tyrant this guy is, when actually maybe he was cleaning up the Norman Knights kings' horrible mess, right? And whatever deals they were making, right? Because if they created that, what did the Mayflower create? The Mayflower Compact. And that's what the Constitution and the Declaration is mirrored after. It was the first time that people themselves, without the oversight of monarchs, religious leaders, created their own set of rules and laws, and it was an agreement, and they were the separatists, even though they pledged loyalty to the king. It's kind of crazy that they're all connected to that same king, and especially the lead ones. And it's what is used. I mean, that looks like the Declaration of Independence, right? It's just one piece of paper, right? And, you know, in the name of God, amen. Not Jesus.
right.
Because so even the Puritans and the Mayflower and them that leaving England and coming here were like, do not dare say Jesus. The glory of God is in here, right? Loyal subjects of our dread. So they hate Lord King James by the grace of God. There's no Jesus anywhere. There's no Jesus. There's never been in any part of our history in Western society being written in law, except for canon law. That's why it's called canon law. Right? And what's crazy is it's got constitutions. It's got the word constitute in here and frame. So constitution and the framers. I know I'm a Mayflower guy, so it's like, you know. But and then the signers. The idea is the same as the Declaration. The signers are the founders and the framers. Right? So that's why presidents are all connected to the Mayflower direct lineage. And that's why there's a Mayflower Society, which you have to prove, as you've seen the paperwork I've had to do, and I have to use my great aunt's paperwork from 100 years ago to get in, because it's like, they just don't like go, oh, show your ancestry and you're allowed in. You have to provide the birth certificates from both sides all the way going back 100 plus years. The farther out that we go in time, the more you have to prove to say that you're part of some, where they know, okay, for sure. Right? And that's where those are the names that become. And so if you look at the names, Isaac Allerton's number 5, and that's the one who has the connection to the most presidents, right? And then what was the other one? I think it was Bradford, right? I think it was William Bradford, the one that we looked at. Yeah.
I thought it was Hollingsworth. Is there a Hollings or something, or Hollingsworth, or
John Holland. John Holland.
A different one.
It's John Holland.
I thought it would be Bradford, but it wasn't.
It's John Holland.
Which is interesting, because Bradford was the one who tried so hard to make it all about him.
Because he was the governor. Yeah, he was the governor of it, right? And he was the head. And then Isaac Allerton was the assistant governor. But he also didn't like to have to do anything hardcore.
He moved away from the area, right?
Right.
So, But it's interesting to me with what you're saying. Maybe there's this interest in what's happening in the Holy Land today, because remember when Trump said the thing you just talked about, like, we're going to make Gaza be this beautiful shopping district. I don't remember what he said, but it was something like that.
He even threw
right?
some AI fucking reel up that somebody had made.
But maybe it's the way that we can finally make it. And this is something you had actually had in a prediction. I don't remember when it was.
It was like years ago. It was
something like
2023.
It's gonna become like this place where nobody gets to claim it, but you all sort of pay admission, like Disneyland. I don't remember what exactly you said.
Actually, yeah, it goes back a little longer, but yeah, that's exactly been my prediction.
So that
before October 7th happened.
So maybe it's this idea of let's get in there so we can just get all of this feeling and emotion and religious craziness out of it and regulate it so everybody can come in and access it and then do their thing and go. Because I've been teaching about the Middle Ages, the Reformation. This is all the stuff I'm teaching this semester. And one of the things we looked at were the medieval pilgrimages that a lot of them eventually ended in Jerusalem. So for a really long time, and it wasn't just the Crusaders, right? It's all these people want to get there to see it as well. So the Crusaders were not just trying to conquer it and get it back into Christian hands, right? And a lot of times the popes called crusades just so they could gain some sort of popularity. Right. But it's also because they want to make it a free, or they want to make it open for the pilgrims who want to go there for whatever sacred reasons. And if you have people from other religions who want to go there as well for sacred reasons, I mean, it makes sense to try to get a handle on the situation there.
So my I don't know if it's a prediction, but I think the way that it would only work is if either the Indians from India were in control, as far as you can't have anybody, you can't have a Jew run it, you can't have a Muslim run it, you can't have a Christian run it, because all of their religions all say that the end times, they're the ones because of the temple and it all. So no matter what, all their religions are all about that we own it. We have go back to the Council of Nicaea. Anybody that's a Christian, you're following the Council of Nicaea that believes that you have the rights to Jerusalem. Right? So that's where it gets, and that's kind of like a FU to the Jews, right? We have to remember that, like, Constantine, when he was doing that, like, Judaism was really not, it was questionable whether it was even going to survive then, right? But it was kind of a big FU to them, and the Muslims do an FU to the Christians, and you know what I mean? Like, they're all flipping each other off. So I think we need Indian, Vedic, or Tibetans to run it, or Africans from Africa. That would be the best karma of all time. The English and everybody who've come in and tried to take over Africa and have always lost. Let's get some Africans in there with some machine guns and been like, you guys want to fuck around with your stupid religion and fucking start shooting.
What about the Chinese? Maybe they were trying to do that.
No, because they like Uyghur camps and stuff like that. But, that's why I think India would be the most likely. And if you think about where we are in the world right now, and India being the power that it is, and never intermingling their religion unto others and their Hinduism, although most of those three religions would think that the Hindus and their Vedic gods and all that stuff are the demons, right? But even though Jesus would say differently.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the legends that he went.
So that's where I attack all these people out there. That's my view, is like, you're following something that your version of Jesus that you're being told would think that's a demonic thing, when actually that's where he went. So that's who I think should run it, is some really chilled out Hindu and Tibetan monks that, yeah, keep it all chill, but don't bring your stupid religion in here. Because what the problem with Trump doing it is, it's coming from a Mason thing, and it's coming, whether he subconsciously knows it or not, it's in his blood. It's coming from a Templar Knight idea of getting it back. And I've said this, and I'll be the one that predicts that I don't think America's involved with Israel because they're controlled by Israel. I think it's the opposite. I think that America is just like, stay friends with the people who have the door on the place that you want back. Because once they fail or once there's a little crack, we can take it. And that's coming from somebody with the bloodline and that knows that's how they're looking at it. And you don't hear that. That's an original thought. You're not hearing that anywhere else. You know? And so
everybody stops with
and
Israel.
that's where I would say Saudi Arabia is doing the same thing. They were the ones who did the great deals with Israel, with America being in 2019, right? And then have been trying again, and that's Saudi Arabia is the Muslim country that's also like, let's be close and friends with them too, and we'll have our shoulder on the door. And America's like, we got our shoulder and we'll look after each other, but once the door opens and they don't have control anymore, then it's on. We like no bad blood, that we both are at the door at the same time, and whoever gets in first, and however it pans out, it pans out. That's how it's going on. That's what the astrology says too. So,
wow. Sounds like when Berlin was divided.
Correct, and that was Saturn, Neptune.
Wow.
In Capricorn, the same Saturn, Neptune that brought on the Magna Carta to the birth of King John, and the opposition with a Saturn in Aries to a Neptune in Libra. I'm glad we got all this out.
Yeah, I can't believe we got here from the Wizard of Oz. And actually, it was from your picture of Venus being controlled by Saturn.
Or the question in the picture is he controlling her? Is he helping her weed out her delusional?
Yeah, exactly.
This relationship's good. I just met them. Yeah, right. Get out of here. I want my life to, it's like all these dreams we keep thinking that we can have that are really just reoccurring the same pattern, or just we think we're reinventing the dream, and it's just the same dream. And then that's why people feel empty, right? Like somebody who chases like, well, I have a dream to be an entrepreneur. And it's like, well, you're doing the same work that you were doing before, but yeah, you're an entrepreneur. And like, what's the higher version? You got to let go of the dream and go through this passageway and let God show you this bigger dream.
Surrender, Dorothy.
Surrender, Dorothy, and don't be so attached to things at all right now that the more attached you are to it, the more it's going to hurt you. So Saturn's actually helping, like, let's stop these patterns. He's trying to help her.
Yeah, and you talk about that in Deep Astrology this week also about Mercury and Venus, right?
Right.
So that Mercury can be trying to think its way out of it, and Venus, I don't know what she's thinking or doing.
She's not up yet.
Okay, so she's still kind of in twilight, but Saturn is also...
She's in her Aya ceremony.
Okay.
And Saturn is actually like showing up and being like, no, I'm not the one that's guiding the ceremony. I'm stopping the ceremony here. Because look at all these people that are messing with, look at all these entities messing with you, girl. They just want to fuck you. Let's get out of here. Yeah. Like.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I thought that everybody needs to watch that Deep Astrology. I would say this is a good week because it also is that full moon in Libra. That's going to really magnify a lot of that energy. And people are maybe at the very end of the Venus retrograde thinking they're entering the best new deal of their lives or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's the opposite. It's like there's stuff that's just being pushed away, but the idea like it's pushing me away and then pushing me into this person that's when it's really bad. Like, oh, I was meant to meet you. That's when it's even worse. It's worse than the thing that got removed. It's kind of like you're replacing toxic with more toxic. Because then you're not seeing the actual, like, it's kind of like, yeah, we together don't like this person. Oh, so your bond, it's more than trauma bonding, it's toxic bonding. trauma bonding's gnarly, but toxic bonding looks good when it's really not. Right? So the scarier part is the swaps or the exchanges that you think is more glorified when it's like Indiana Jones, kind of like when he has his hand in the first Temple of Doom, right? And he's like, and he's like, he's about to replace the artifact and he's got the bag of sand. It's like, I'm going to get this thing and I'm replacing it with this thing I think is a bag of sand right now. Well, you're actually getting a big rolling ball. You know what I mean? Like that's where like, don't. That's Saturn coming in and being like, you really going to do this right now?
Mm-hmm. But it's okay if, this is the thing that you were talking about too, is if it's okay if you've known these people for a long time, or it's sort of like
it's been stable.
Yeah, you don't want to go with the brand new thing that.
No.
Yeah.
Be like if somebody approached somebody right now over this last 24 to 48 hours of Venus retrograde station on Saturn, be like, join this religion right now. You know what? You're so nice. But it's like underneath you're like, well, they're kind of cute. So yeah, maybe I can like score a date. But then you're like now doubling down and like, oh, and then they're the person you'll never catch. And oh God. And and now you're stuck in that thing forever. Or it's the person, as I said, when Venus started slowing down in the fall, that's always the sign like, hey, you just turn off relationships as far as like love, romantic, or shifting them out so extreme. Like, especially if they're stable, for something that's more, it's like 7 of Cups, like, this Venus retrograde is very 7 of Cups. In Aries, ego to the soul. There's also soul toxic parts, not just ego. So, yeah, you would just not want to. Sucks, but that's part of the whole new story being written. Is it's really trying to rotor-rooter everything out right now. Like, and in the middle of a rotor-rooter, you don't start brushing your teeth right after, or take a poop right after the rotor-rooter before they've cleaned it all up and they've got all their equipment out. Like you're brushing your teeth next to the big. Did you get all the shit out of my toilet? Can I use it right now? Oh, some of the water splashed up on the toilet paper. I guess I'll use that. That's exactly the best way you could describe somebody. Like, yeah, I'm going in right now. They just cleaned it out. No, they're not out there yet. The whole Venus direct and going through Saturn is once they're all out, once they've cleaned it up, once you made sure there's no more shit around, toxic crap around, it's all nice, then use the bathroom. People are too impatient though. Like, oh no, I got to have it right now. It's divine timing. I have to poop right now. It's like there's the bathroom that always works. Let's go use that one. But because this one feels so rotored out, like I just want to use the one that I can. Yeah. So
good advice.
That's the best advice I can give, because there's no other better way to put it than that. For sometimes people get confused in the other parts because it gets their emotions entangled. And if you think of human design, that's where so many of these planets are hitting the solar plexus, that people have to wait on the emotion for longer than a week, I'd say. It's been like, this is a 6-month solar plexus transit of like, is the feeling still there? Are you sure? Because it's doing this, But people where it's already been solid, there shouldn't have been problems. So it's like, anybody where there's been no problems, whatever. Anyway, maybe we'll have fun on the next one to go deeper, even weirder into that whole bloodline thing with the presidents, because we haven't even got to go through the individuals that are the head of those families that connect to King John and what they did in society and the astrology during those times, or what kings they were connected to. Like which monarchs, That's where it was so interesting that in that video I showed you, it's like President Johnson is the closest related to Obama. And the only way that he's connected to all the other presidents in the line is through the wife of Jefferson Davis, who really isn't a president of America, but was the president of the Confederate States of America, which is so ironic because Johnson was a total KKK supporter, Southern Democrat who was horrible about civil rights, but then ironically signed the Civil Rights Movement or Act, but also is very connected with the JFK BS, right? And connected with the South in the worst ways. And of course, he'd be connected through the wife of Jefferson Davis and the Taylor line that's connected with Polk and Taylor, Zachary Taylor, all of them. But then that's the ironic part that Obama is connected to somebody that supported like segregation. Isn't that weird?
It is weird. Yeah.
And that Zachary or that Taylor line, there's a lot of Southern Democrat vibes. So if you're, anyway, that'll be more fun. To me, that would be like the most epic show is to be able to like pick like the really crazy ones that are connected to where were there on the maternal or the father's side, right? What monarchs were they connected with, and were they on the court, and what astrology hits on? If we look at those, that's hitting now to see what families, because if you think of like too much has been sucked up on Elon Musk, right? But nobody's thinking about where are the other people involved right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Around the circle.
I've been wondering about
right?
that
Because all the air is just sucked up on Elon. But everybody at the beginning was like, look at the tech bros. Nobody's talking about that anymore. Everybody's just only on Elon. It's kind of like, and you have to do that with every administration. Because like, who was surrounded around Biden's energy and where was all the money going? And who's benefiting from all this? And like, we're going to find out on Friday what Bill Maher thinks of Trump after having dinner with Trump and Kid Rock and Dana White at the White House. And he got to tell Trump all of his concerns. He's the number one critic of Trump since 2015 and 16. That he's waiting until his show Friday night. So we're about to, and I've said since day one I said that Bill Maher 0 degree Aquarius would be the one that would show us the Pluto Aquarius transformation of all time. You did. I did. I've said that for so long because he's my opposite, and I know.
And I remember so many times at the old studio coming in, and you were watching his old.
Yeah.
Just the one where he sits down with people, right? Not. Doesn't he do a podcast too?
Oh yeah, that was just 2 years ago. He started sitting Club Random. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and you would always say that there's so many things that you've said that I've thought that would be interesting, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I don't see how that could actually happen.
Yeah, I started saying it in like 2018. I said, when Pluto comes into Aquarius, Bill Maher will not be the biggest critic of Trump and will flip into something, maybe not a Republican, but will flip. And he's already disassociating himself completely with most of the Democratic Party right now. So the fact that he went and just met with Trump and we're all waiting to see what he said, because I love Bill Maher. Like I would consider myself more aligned with a lot of his political alignment, and then 3/4 of Trump's part. So it's kind of like those two together. The best parts of what I like of both of them are what I align with. Which would be the formation of a new party, like a true new party, if the best of those sides. I'm definitely not full Trump and I'm not full Bill Maher, right? It's like I'm the best of both those guys' sides that are good. So I'm interested to see what was said and what came out, because Kid Rock gave a little preview, but not enough to even for me to say would even warrant what it's going to sound like, but that it went really well and that they got to talk and that he had Bill Maher had a whole list, and he admitted he had a list before he went of grievances he's been writing down since 2015 and 16 during the debates.
Wow.
But Bill Maher did say before going, like, I gave $1 million to Obama. I never got to go to the White House. I supported the Biden campaign so much, and I supported both Obama campaigns, and they never wanted to ask me for advice or hear a criticism or hear even positive things. And Trump, who I hated on the most and said he'd never leave the White House and all that, he's inviting me to the White House to let me talk about my criticisms to me. So I think that says a lot about where we're at. The most important things right now is if you're able to listen, you know, it's okay to not agree still, but
Yeah.
it's good to be open to listen.
I agree.
It's kind of what the Magna Carta was. So
Kind of. Yeah, definitely. Well, but codifying everybody has rights here.
yeah,
So respect them and don't end in a civil war, but then they always do. So let's see what happens.
yeah. Actually, you know who brought it up just 2 days ago was Alec Baldwin.
Brought up what?
That he's never felt it before, and he just feels like saying, I feel like we're in a pre-Civil War and it's happening right now in front of our eyes. He just randomly went on Instagram and went live or put out a video for like 4 minutes long, just being like, I'm tired, but I have to get this out. I feel like we're in a pre-Civil War right now in America. It's happening, and that it's not changing. And he started bringing up all the history of the Civil War. And I'm like, okay, this motherfucker, even though it's Alec Baldwin, I'm like, at least he's such an Aries. At least this is where, like, with Aries, it's like, there's Neptune already coming out. Right? So I was like, okay, he's on the ball with what's happening astrologically. So whether I like him or not, I don't give a fuck about that. Is like, are you speaking what the astrology is saying, the truth? That's all I look for. So, plus I watched the first episode of his new reality show, and I'm like, God, that poor dude. Like, what the?
What?
Like,
That was a new reality show. I thought.
It's the biggest show on TLC.
Or I mean, didn't he get convicted of?
No, he got out of that.
He did.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I've been out of the loop for a
No,
while.
the girl who is in charge of the ammo is the one who got.
Oh no.
Yeah. But the armor. The armor. She. The armor's the one. Not me. But anyway, his wife Ilaria and him have had like 7 kids, you know? And he lives in New York on like the Upper East Side in an apartment.
7 kids already?
Okay. I know. And he had him like at like 50, like at 50 or whatever. So he's like in his late 60s, early, like, and he's got all these kids running around, and his wife who's like telling him how to talk. Don't interrupt me. I'm just like looking at this guy. I'm like, no wonder this guy's just like, fuck Trump. I hate this. He hates everything. He's not happy, man. I'm like this. I watched one episode, and then he brings up how I couldn't believe this, but his wife's ex is like an athlete, and he got naked in front of them and showed his dong. And then I guess Alec Baldwin's like, that thing's so big, put it away. And then just keeps bringing it up. She's like, why are you bringing this thing up? And it's like, I mean, this is what I have to deal with, man. This is, you know, I'm like, this, like, what? That dude's in. You want to talk about that is a very Aries situation right now. Like, be careful, Aries. How deep did you get in the rabbit hole? Because now Neptune's like, ha, 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 welcome. You know, like, boy, oh boy, that is like, he's probably watching himself on the show, waking up like, what the fuck? It's so mere, Neptune. Like,
he needs a rolling wagon psychic to come by and help him out with their crystal ball. I'm just picturing him waking up, right? And that guy's going to be right behind him. The psychic from Kansas.
He looks so tired in the show. He's like this, like he has 7 kids running around, pushing things in the kitchen and all this in an apartment. It's a nice one. Of course, it's a big one, but it's on the Upper East Side, right? Might be Upper West Side, but I think it's Upper East Side. So he's sitting up there in the nice streets, and he's, you know, it's a top apartment in New York City, but he's in the middle of New York City, and it's already so crowded and energetically there, and you've got 7 kids just running around like crazy maniacs, and you're like at the age where you should be just kind of chilling out. And you've got, and his wife was his yoga, was like a yoga instructor or whatever. And long story short, I'm like, this dude, that is just, at that age,
It just sounds
that's
like
too much.
such a very strange choice of a show.
It's on
I
TLC.
thought this was the guy who, he's Mr. Big Democrat, right? So what a great campaign for being accessible to the ordinary person. You're living up in your Upper East Side apartment with your 7 kids and your wife and living this wonderful life while all the ordinary folks are suffering right now, I thought. You know what I'm saying?
No,
he's not going with the narrative of the overall party.
So because, you know me, I'm Mr. Been in TV, TLC does shows like Sister Wives. Their number one show, still has been for a long time, but
I
like,
used to love TLC.
right? It's, well, they do the 600-pound, 1,000-pound sisters, 600-pound sisters, like they do, 90-day fiance, but they do that now where the couples all go to couples therapy and it's a fucking wreck. I love it. It's great fucking reality TV. But it's like, that's great reality TV. A guy who's convicted of murdering or manslaughter through shooting a girl on a set, who's married to the yoga fucking instructor that he met, who was this hot little chick when he was famous, who they popped out 7 kids over the years, and he's having to go through this in the middle of like the world where it's at and all the shit that he has to go through. Like, that's good reality TV. But the deeper thing is the Baldwins. Haley Baldwin is married to Justin Bieber, his brother's daughter, right? So his niece. The Baldwins have always, to stay in power, put themselves wherever they need to be. So Stephen Baldwin, who I did in 2013, the Portland Fashion Style and Music, for Portland Fashion Style Awards. It was just for the Fashion and Style Awards. I don't know if you remember, I did that in Portland, Oregon, 2013. I hosted it. And Stephen Baldwin was there, and I met him and got to hang out with him backstage. And he's the one that you're seeing always on like Twitter talking about, we know everything about the whole Diddy thing and what's happened. So like, Haley Baldwin's been a plant, which I said in my articles on 17 in 2019 for 17 magazine, that Justin Bieber and her, like, it's like oil and water. And you're seeing him really fall, but the Baldwins have a hand in all that. And I don't know what hand it is at this point, but there's this interesting like flip I feel that's coming from them. Like they've had this like other, we're watching actors from the politicians to everything play their parts, their sides, and then switch sides on purpose. It was all part of the plan. So I guess we can end there. This,
That's a good place.
I really like that. Yes. I have to go see Alaria. He's my friend. So it was great to be back with you. It's been a month.
I know. Let's not wait so long next time.
No.
But it was great.
There's been a lot going on.
Yeah. There has been.
Do you have any new things coming out?
Do I have any new things
Yeah,
coming out?
do you and Natalie have any other interviews? If you haven't watched, you guys have had quite a lineup.
We have had quite a lineup. So if people haven't already watched our interview with Dylan, they should go watch that, the human design maven. That was, I think, our last episode of Gemini Rising. And if they haven't
Before that, you had
Amanda Ellis.
That's right, you had Amanda Ellis.
Really
Who's
great.
next?
I am not exactly sure. We do have someone lined up for the end of the month.
Oh, and you guys had JK Ultra just
Yeah, we
recently
did.
too.
People really should watch that one. That was a really great one. So, yeah, we will have another one coming up in a few weeks. Natalie's in Hawaii, so when she gets back, we've got another show lined up.
Perfect.
And then I'll be done with my semester. So I'm in the midst of teaching at the moment. So I'm always occupied.
Finals
Part
coming
of my
up.
brain is there. So yeah,
Professoring.
I'm professoring right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I did an interview with Joni Patry, which it's not out yet, but I'm putting it out the next day or so. I did it yesterday. It was awesome. So
Yeah, I can't wait
that'll,
to
I
see
think,
it.
be really powerful for the astrology community. People, if people don't know, her and I've known each other now like 6 years, so, or 7 years now. So it was awesome to be able to catch up with her and then ask her some really deep questions on the Vedic side of things. And I can talk Vedic, so it was fun for me to do an interview in Vedic astrology because I love Vedic astrology, and have her really give all of her predictions and talk about her. She's got this really cool, her son like helped her with technology with a galactic planner, like that integrates with your phone, your calendar of every transit that's happening in your life and what to pay attention to, your dashas, all that. Like, she's on top of it. So that should be out probably Friday, because I have to do this 18 for Elephants tomorrow. And if anybody wants to come to the after party, tickets are $150 for a good cause. It's not for profit. It's going to help all the elephants in Africa. So, or you can play golf, and that's tomorrow at Pelican Hill in Newport Beach.
Did you put the information?
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
over my Instagram and my Facebook, and sent an email out, did all this
Yeah,
stuff.
I wish I could go. It seems like a great.
It's all good.
event. Yeah.
You're professoring.
Tomorrow is my busiest day. Otherwise, I would be there. It's a great cause, and I don't know. I'm so excited that High Vibe gets to be a part of it through you, and that you're going to be such a big part of it. I know is there an online auction for that also, or is it just
Yeah.
in person? Because
No,
I
yeah,
saw
there's an
people
online
could
one.
win reading with you or
Yep.
Oracle Marine too.
Yep.
That's part of it.
There's a lot of stuff on the auction, but yeah, you could do it online or you could do it there. And yeah, there's awards for like the golf tournament tomorrow, and then I'm DJing and hosting the after party. So
It'd be great.
will not be live streamed. I have to be there in person on the golf course in Newport Beach at Pelican Hill, overlooking the ocean at sunset.
It's a beautiful sight.
Nobody, never been done before like that.
Yeah.
I've been getting kind of the never been done before, like Sedona. Nobody had got to DJ like that and bring that kind of equipment into a fucking gym and do this. It was like throw a prom, galactic prom. Like it was, everybody in Sedona was like, I've never even seen that much, like being able to get away with this. It was like, oh, it was so awesome. And then I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm doing Pelican Hill at sunset on the golf course, overlooking the ocean at sunset for a good cause to help all the elephants in Africa. I'm like, okay, I'm down.
Does the after party start
4:30 at 4:30 p.m.
6:30 is the end, or do you think
It
it'll
ends
go
at
a little
6:30
bit?
p.m. and the sun goes down.
I wish I could get there, but
Yeah. So if you're in the area, LA, Orange County, San Diego, don't miss out. So, all right. Much love to you all. And make sure you watch those episodes of Gemini Rising with Ann and Natalie. And catch you all in the next one. We need to come up with like a cool like tagline, like love your history or something cool. Not that, but you know what I mean? It's still Venus
figure it
retrograde.
out.
We'll figure it out. Adios. Bye-bye.
Monster.
Attention, please.
Yo. Okay. Monster.
Attention, please.